Thursday. Today is Thursday, June 16th, 2022, and I don't know where I am. I'm parked on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, and I'm not even sure I'm still in Louisiana. I haven't had a bar of service all day. I've been driving for 9 hours, and the only thing I want to do is sleep, but I'm afraid to close my eyes. Staring at this screen is only making it worse, but I need the distraction. None of this makes sense. My house is a 30-minute drive to town if you take the highway, but in any other direction, you can ride the backroads for hours. Most aren't even on the map. When I was younger, Mom would take me riding on summer evenings, and we always found new routes to explore. That's also how I learned to drive. After getting my license, I started going more often. Sometimes I would bring friends, but for the most part, it's something I enjoyed doing alone, especially after Mom died. She was killed by a drunk driver 6 years ago. I've never seen a house or more than a handful of other vehicles out here. It's perfect for camping. I've stayed overnight more times than I can count and always felt perfectly safe. It's almost like being the only person in the world. The only difference with this trip was that damn tunnel. Life has been hard lately, and only having one job on the books doesn't help. There was nothing on this wedding's menu that could be cooked the day before, so instead of doing anything productive, I convinced myself to go for a drive, which was clearly a mistake. There's a beautiful, crystal-clear pond that became my go-to place for quick trips or days I brought someone along. It's not very far, and I know every road in between. Or I thought I did. Leaving the pond, there should only be 2 ways to go, back home or further into nowhere. But then I saw a third option. While turning the truck around, I found myself staring at a paved road hidden behind the tree line. While it's understandable to miss while driving past, I've been to that pond 1,000 times and always turned around in the same place. This shouldn't have been my first time seeing it, but I was too excited to think more of it. A closer look revealed only shrubs and weeds blocking the way, so I decided to drive straight through. A new path so close to home was too big of a deal to pass up. Of course, that feels incredibly ignorant to say now. I got through the brush easily, and after a mile, it cleared up again. But 6 miles after that, I knew it was time to turn back. That's when I finally saw the end of the road. Ahead was an overpass with what looked like old train tracks, and what I thought was a dead end was actually a tunnel running beneath it. At first, it looked too small to drive through. I only wanted to get my headlights close enough to see inside, but then the road did keep going. I could see daylight at the other end of the tunnel. The tunnel itself was damp, and the air smelled musty, but it was completely empty. When I came out of the other side, the road stretched ahead for miles, with occasional turnoffs on both sides. It should have been impossible to get lost by going straight. I should have been able to turn around at any point and drive directly back to the pond. I still don't understand why that isn't the case. I had hoped to find a landmark to use on the next visit, but after an hour of nothing but random cutoffs, I realized how late it was and finally turned back. Everything looked exactly the same as far as I could tell. I had no clue where I went wrong, but an hour and a half later, I was still cruising with no sign of that tunnel. If anything, I was driving even faster than before. It doesn't make any damn sense. I drove for another 30 minutes before stopping completely. I had to pee and needed time to think without wondering if I was headed even further away from home. If I had made even a single turn, I could believe being lost, but the idea of turning back after driving in a straight line felt unnatural. It would mean hours of retracing my steps only to turn around again when that didn't work. How many hours would be wasted covering the same ground? But then, there's no choice because something is obviously wrong. It's maddening. I'm still stuck in that hellish thought loop, but I couldn't just stay on the side of the road. In the end, I turned around once again, this time going much, much slower. The only way I could imagine getting lost was if the road had split somewhere when I wasn't paying attention. I came to a rolling stop at every turnoff and even got out a few times, but there was absolutely no chance I merged off any of them. By the time I made it back to my original stopping point, the sun was starting to set. My brain fed me whatever I needed to hear to avoid turning back a third time. I figured Mom and I had only been able to spend so much time on the back roads because we took the small, curvy trails that never really led anywhere. Now, I was traveling in a straight line. It had to lead somewhere. All I needed to do was make it to the next town, or maybe not even that far if I could find a spot with cell service. But now it's almost midnight, and I stopped because the road suddenly ended. Or at least the pavement did. There's nothing but a long, dusty trail left, and there's no chance of finding a signal that way. I need to wait for morning and check out some of the cutoffs. Nothing about this. Friday. I wonder if I've been reported missing. I'm sure I have. How could I not be? Surely the back roads are the first place they'll look, right? I'm sure it is. Sweet fire shits, I thought I was going to die last night. I was lying across the back seat, thinking to myself, when I heard something moving around in the forest. I assumed it was an animal until it broke through the tree line, and the unmistakable sound of shoes scraping against concrete made me sit up. There was a half second of euphoric relief as I imagined myself being rescued by a kindly old farmer before my body went numb with dread. People volunteering with search parties didn't wander through the forest alone at night without flashlights. This person hadn't driven either. I would have heard an engine. I didn't know what the hell to do. My first instinct was to jump into the driver's seat and run for it, but then I imagined bullets flying through the windows. It seemed reasonable to think a person skulking around a dark forest would be armed. I wanted my pistol from the glove compartment more than anything, but my arms refused to obey. The footsteps were moving slowly, like someone was checking out my trunk, and when they turned to walk along the passenger side, my body finally moved. Without the phone's light, it was too dark to see anything, but as I slowly inched forward, the footsteps paused next to the front passenger door, and my heart stopped along with them. I hesitated with my hands on the glove compartment's handle, wondering if the light would come on when I realized something that shot chills down my spine. I hadn't locked the doors after using the bathroom. Instead of fumbling for the controls, I felt for the knob and gently pushed it down. At the same instant, the dull thud of a locked handle being pulled broke the night silence like a gunshot, and there was no further caution in my movements. I ripped open the glove compartment, grabbed my gun, and racked one into the chamber as the sound of several footsteps fled back into the forest. There had been nothing to indicate multiple people were outside, but there was no mistaking it now. Feet were skidding across the pavement as others were already tearing through the thick brush, and I threw myself into the driver's seat. The headlights came on just in time to reveal the last two figures vanishing into the darkness. I was in tears with relief over the fact that I had turned around before parking, and it wasn't because of forethought, but fear. Just looking at that long dirt road made my stomach clench. As for the group of crazies, I don't know. It might be time to entertain the possibility that I'm the one who's crazy. I only caught a quick glimpse as I sped away, but those people resembled terminal cancer patients with animalistic movements. They were sickly thin and hunched over like gorillas, but moved with a deceptive speed. Thanks to the adrenaline, I was wide awake and traveling faster than I should have been, but I wanted as much distance between myself and those people as possible. After driving a few miles, my brain slowly began formulating coherent thoughts again. I think it's safe to say my new friends don't have motorized transportation, but I drove for almost an hour before stopping. If I didn't close my eyes, I was going to fall asleep at the wheel, and if I wreck, I'm dead. There were 3 hours before dawn, so I set an alarm, passed out, and was somehow still alive when it sounded. I woke to a foggy morning, and the long road ahead served as a bleak reminder of my situation. Mother Nature called, and I was starving. But, luckily, there were a few basic supplies in the trunk. After eating 2 power bars, I somehow managed to stick with water instead of downing the bottle of whiskey. And, thank goodness, or I wouldn't have it now. The shit I've seen today is enough to make that gun look mighty appetizing. All goddamn day I kept driving straight down that same road, the way I should have been going in the first place. I didn't care if it took 12 hours to find the next town. I wasn't going to start turning down a bunch of random roads that could take me in circles. By 9, I had seen nothing but trees and grassy clearings. My stomach was growling louder than my music, and I was barely containing my anger when a familiar beeping sent me soaring over the edge. When I finally regained a modicum of control, my throat was raw and my face looked as red as it felt. The gas light was on, and the possibility of dying out here became very real very fast. When I came around the next curve, I thought I was hallucinating. A small gas station appeared in the distance, but there was no way I had driven further than yesterday, and I definitely wouldn't have passed it without noticing. As I came closer, my heart sank when I realized it was abandoned. There were no cars, lights, or signs, just old pumps and a dark store. I parked anyway, just to think for a minute, and continued to be surprised. The building looked like it hadn't been touched in 20 years, and yet the pumps looked as if they were installed last week. I got out to stretch my legs, and the ones next to me turned on, including its TVs. It shouldn't have been possible, but that hardly matters in this place. Whether I was hallucinating or not, I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. Even more astonishing than the fact it worked was the woman on the TV. She was giving a local news and weather report like what you would see at a normal gas station.
It's a beautiful sunny day on the paved back roads. The last of the morning's fog will be clearing up shortly, and we'll have a high of 98 this afternoon. Those transitioning to dirt roads should show due caution, as we've had significant rise in stranded sightings. Thank you for choosing Last Stop Station. Until next time, safe travels.
I didn't understand half of what she said, and there was plenty more I can't remember. If I find another one, I'm going to have my phone ready to record. Thank goodness I have a car charger, or I wouldn't even have that by now. After refueling, I decided to take a look at the store. I was completely out of food and on my last bottle of water. I would have taken anything that wasn't poisonous, but I was shocked to find water, soups, and canned fruit simply there for the taking. While those were fully stocked, there were no snack foods, soft drinks, or random accessories. If the canned sell-by dates weren't so recent, I would think that stuff had sat there for years. There was nowhere to cook the soup, no phone, and no cash register either. Everything about the store was just off. But as strange as it was, I didn't want to leave. It was nice to finally stretch my legs and be out of the truck for longer than a bathroom break. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford to waste time hanging out in an abandoned gas station. In the end, I compromised by staying long enough to eat. I tried not to pin my hopes on someone else stopping by, but I found myself watching the road more than I cared to admit. My original idea was to find a makeshift pot and build a fire, but then I remembered some of my camping gear was still in the truck. With my hot plate, the only hard part was opening the cans with a dull pocket knife. As expected, no one came, but I couldn't waste any more time there. At that point, I expected to be spending the rest of the day on the road and convinced myself to take some supplies. Before I knew it, I'd robbed the place blind, and I hope the police come looking. They won't, but I can dream. I felt better with a full meal on my stomach and the truck full of free supplies, but it's hard to keep a cool head when you're coming on your second night of being lost in the middle of nowhere. I eventually drove straight into the sunset until once again being forced into a sudden stop when the pavement ended. The way forward was yet another long, dusty trail, and this one inspired the same cold dread as the last. Logic told me the weird, pale people couldn't be way out there too, but I wasn't taking any chances. I turned back and drove for another hour before stopping for the night. After eating a can of peaches, I started recording, and now I can't stop thinking about that lady on that little TV. She was talking about these roads like they were their own town or something, and I want to hear that part about being stranded again. Maybe I'm not the only one who's had this happen. Either way, I've had enough for one day. I need more than a few hours of sleep. Staying on this road isn't an option anymore. Tomorrow, I need to choose one of the cutoffs. Saturday. There's no question, I'm not in Louisiana anymore. I'm not even in the real world. I met someone this afternoon. I don't think he's real. He's either a hallucination or a demon. I'm just not sure which. I had essentially chosen a cutoff at random when I couldn't find the gas station again, and 20 miles later, there was a man walking along the shoulder. I was almost too afraid to stop, but he got on his knees in the middle of the road, begging. In the end, I needed someone to talk to more than I cared about the possibility of being murdered. He claims to know a little about what's going on here, and though his story is completely unbelievable, I can't come up with an alternative. He doesn't know how or why things are the way they are, but he got here by driving through a tunnel just like I did. Except he was in Pennsylvania. If he hadn't told his story first, I wouldn't have believed him. It sounds too much like my own. The only difference is what happened after he ran out of gas. Since he started off with a quarter tank, he had no idea anything was wrong yet. A service station appeared around the next curve, exactly as it had for me, and based on his description, it sounds like the same one. The pump's TVs came on, and after a brief weather report, there was another confusing public service announcement.
And don't forget to stock up for tomorrow. As usual, our stations will be closed for Sunday. No exceptions. Please ensure all persons are cleared from the premises by no later than 11:59 p.m. And thank you for choosing Last Stop Station. Until next time, safe travels.
After filling his tank, he went inside to find a nearly empty store and only then realized there was no other cars or people in sight. Since the pump worked, he reasoned the store must be open and worried something may have happened to the clerk. Rob went outside to search for a signal, and when he was unsuccessful, he noticed the store was at the bottom of a steep rise. There was no trail, but he was able to make it up fairly easily. Unfortunately, he still couldn't get reception. Determined to drive back to town, he made his way down the slope, only to find the store and his car gone. He swears he walked in a straight line and found the road easily, but it was empty. If it weren't for my own experiences these last few days, I couldn't have believed it. But now I definitely do, assuming Rob is actually real, of course. He had no choice but to start walking, and he headed in the direction he believed would take him to town. Several hours later, he still hadn't seen another car or store, and the sun was beginning to set. That's when he ran into Bonnie and Clyde. At least, that's what they call themselves. They were stopped at their own gas station, and Rob ran straight inside to tell his story, but the couple didn't want to hear it. Clyde held Rob at gunpoint while Bonnie loaded their van. The couple wouldn't give him a ride, but the man was willing to answer a few questions while they waited. Based on what this Clyde guy told Rob, there are 3 stages to the Backroads, each more dangerous than the last. The paved streets are the outskirts and make up Stage 1. The dirt roads are Stage 2 and lead deeper into the maze, while Stage 3 is tire tracks in the grass and the heart of the maze. The entrance can be found almost anywhere in the world if you venture deep enough into nowhere, but the exit can only be found in Stage 3. Gas stations only appear when a vehicle is low on fuel, and they disappear the moment you leave. Had Rob climbed the hill before filling his tank, he would still have a car. Thank goodness I have the camping gear, or I would have made the same mistake when trying to heat my soup. The only exception to this rule is Sunday. If you run out of fuel while the store is closed, you'll have to sit there until it reopens. Anything that was inside when it disappeared will still be there except for people. We don't know what happens to them, but Clyde said there used to be 4 people in their group. The other 2 decided to see where the place went when it disappeared, but when it came back, only their bags and clothes were left behind. The stores supposedly have beer and junk food in Stage 2, and that alone has me interested. I finished my whiskey last night, and I don't think I can handle this place sober. I would already be on my way now if it wasn't past midnight. Compared to the last two stages, the paved streets are fairly safe until the transition to dirt. That's where the stranded like to lurk, and what Rob was on his way to becoming before I found him. The ones who lose their vehicles can't make gas stations appear and eventually turn to the forest for shelter. They hide deep in the dark woods during the day and only come out at night. The lucky are able to join an existing group or form their own. They need enough members to ambush travelers, but not too many to feed. Those who are rejected get eaten, and those who try to survive alone starve. Eventually, they begin to look like the ones I saw, and had I been asleep with my doors unlocked, I would have become their dinner. As for Stage 2 itself, Rob only knows that something hunts the roads at night. And when he asked Clyde about the final stage, the man went white as a sheet and refused to answer any more questions. As the couple got back into their vehicle, they apologized for their drastic behavior, stating they simply couldn't risk taking on a stranger. Rob is bitter about it, but I don't blame them. If I hadn't been alone and desperate, I never would have stopped. From what it sounds like, people try to find the exit in Stage 3, and the ones who survive the failure resolve to a life on the paved streets. I've been thinking about it all evening, and I would rather die than live the rest of my life out here. The fact I don't want to spend 6 days a week inside a gas station upset Rob pretty bad. We argued for 3 solid hours until I pretended to agree with him. He repeated his same argument with slightly different wording, like I was simply too stupid to understand. I was sick of it, but more importantly, I was starting to suspect Rob would crack me over the head and steal the truck if he didn't get his way. Since the stations will be closed tomorrow, I made sure to run out of gas this evening. I told Rob 3 times to let me get my phone ready before he got out, but the bastard didn't listen. Before I could put the truck into park, he jumped out and rushed into the store. I heard the TV start the second his door was open, but he was completely oblivious. I panicked and missed whatever it was saying while fumbling with my phone. The only part I got recorded was,
Until next time, safe travels.
I'm grateful for the information Rob has shared, but I've decided to go ahead alone. I wish I would have thought to leave him at the station this evening, but I can't waste another day waiting for them to reopen. I don't feel safe sleeping while he's around. Tomorrow morning, when he uses the bathroom, I'll just drive away. I don't know what else to do. For now, he is either asleep in the back seat or really good at fake snoring. My instincts are screaming for me to stay awake, but I feel like someone poured salt into my eyes, and staring at this screen is only making them worse. I need to find another way to keep myself up. Sunday. Rob is dead. I was right about that bastard. Have you ever noticed how crazy ideas sound less crazy in the dark? I kept imagining Rob in the back seat, awake and waiting for me to fall asleep. Then he would sit up, put his belt around my neck, and pull. It bothered me so much, I decided to retrieve my gun. I kept it beneath my leg until dawn and tucked it into my waistband when it was finally time for breakfast. Rob snored the entire night. As I entered the forest to relieve myself, I was feeling fairly foolish. No shit, the man is afraid of going deeper into this hellhole. If I'm this terrified, how must he feel after what he's been through? I'm the monster, walking around with a gun, planning to leave a man for dead just because he disagreed with me. I was fully convinced to abandon my cruel plan until I returned to see Rob in the driver's seat. The passenger window was down, so I had a perfect view of him from the tree line. He was frantically searching for the keys, which were tucked securely into my pocket. I didn't know what he might do if confronted, so I made plenty of noise coming through the last of the brush. When I made it to the truck, he was opening a can of fruit like he hadn't just been trying to leave me behind. I made soup, but avoided taking anything vital out of the truck. I planned to leave him some food and water, but I was ready to take off as soon as he stepped away. Only he didn't. We were both waiting for the other to let down their guard, but Rob lost patience. He revealed the crowbar he'd stashed nearby and calmly explained I would be staying behind since I'm determined to kill myself anyway, as he said. My mind went blank. It's one thing to imagine it, but it's nothing like reality. I was calm and steady as I told him to take the truck. I even threw the keys to him. There was no thought behind it, only instinct. When he turned to walk away, I drew my weapon and fired without warning. The first shot went into the center of his back, and he made a horrible sound as he fell. I hurried closer, but hesitated before making the final shot. Part of me wanted him to fully understand what happened. When he began coughing out blood, I ended his suffering with one more to the head. At least he won't become one of the stranded now. I thought it would feel different, like it would change me, but this place had already done that. I don't care that Rob is dead. I only did what was necessary to survive. The funny thing is, he was right. We should have stayed on the nice paved streets where it was safe. There's much worse things out here than death. After leaving Rob's corpse behind, it took 5 hours to find the next dirt road. It was a long, miserable day, but just to be safe, I turned back to waste some gas. My heart was set on getting into a station with beer at midnight. I didn't know what kind of trouble I was going into, and honestly, I don't care. At 12:03, I drove onto the dirt road, and my high beams revealed a horde of stranded behind the tree line. I didn't slow down, and they didn't come out. They only want easy targets. Unfortunately, I miscalculated how quickly the gaslight would turn on. Less than 20 minutes later, I was still going when a loud roar rattled my windows, followed by the shrill cry of captured prey. Reality began to set in as I realized how foolish my plan had been. Moments later, a low rumble of thunder sounded, and only when it was joined by the violent cracks of breaking limbs did I understand that it wasn't thunder at all. Whatever hunts these roads at night found me. I heard it break through the tree line, but couldn't force myself to look in the mirror. I knew it would be game over if I did. The roads are much smaller in Stage 2, meaning I had to drive slower. My full focus was on navigating the curvy roads as quickly as possible without losing control. But when that bright, beautiful gas station appeared around the next bend, I almost crashed into the pump. Parking as close to the door as possible, I threw myself in the truck without even turning off the engine. I was inside and under the counter for a solid 10 minutes before realizing everything had gone quiet. Very carefully, I crawled to a window and peered outside. It looked like several stranded had been fused together to form this thing. Only its head was visible in the station lights. The rest was thankfully concealed in a sea of darkness. Its shape was far smaller than expected after hearing the sounds it made, but its face was the most grotesque thing I've ever seen. Its mouth was lost beneath masses of pasty, white skin that looked like pure scar tissue, and I can't get the look of its single, glassy eye out of my mind. There was only a gaping, black hole left where the other used to be. Apparently, the stations work as safe zones. I knew it saw me, but it didn't come any closer. After vomiting, I worked up the courage to test my theory and stepped outside to turn off the truck. The figure still didn't move. That made me feel safe enough to finally look around the store. I helped myself to a 6-pack of Coors and Cheetos and tore through the junk food like a death row inmate. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was fairly drunk. I wonder if it's possible to fill up with just enough gas to be on empty before nightfall. That may be my only choice to make it to Stage 3, and there's no way I could outrun that thing all night. Hell, that's a brilliant idea. If that works, I could use that strategy the whole way home. It would give me an entire week to search before the store closed again. Holy shit, I can finally see a light at the end of this miserable tunnel. I'm going to get a very good night's sleep and hit the road at first light. Next Saturday. I guess I dropped the ball on keeping a record of my time in the Backroads, but too bad. No one will ever hear this anyway, and this has to be the worst week of my life. The things I've had to do to survive are unspeakable. I only started recording again to say that I'm quitting. If someone finds this one day, great. If not, I don't really care. My plan to only fill half the tank worked great, but it took 3 days to find a grass trail. Once I did, I never dreamed I would survive long enough to find another store. But now that I have, I'm not leaving. The creatures in this stage don't give a damn if it's day or night. They're hungry. I would rather face the devil himself than walk out that door again. There are things out here that make that one-eyed monster look like a kitten. I'm done. Today is Saturday, and it's almost midnight. I'm going to upload this, even though I know it won't work, but just in case, my name was Jesse Palmer. I hate the Backroads. Hey again. Since my last post went through, I should probably let everyone know what happened. Consider it a PSA. If you find yourself getting lost on any back roads, just stop and GPS your way home before it's too late. You get nothing from that place. Well, except PTSD. Where to even start? Well, with the station, I suppose. You know you're lost when you start thinking of a shitty convenience store as home. Though, to be fair, getting drunk every day was a big help. I understand what I'm about to tell you sounds crazy, but this is what happened. I didn't mention it before. I didn't mention a lot of things, but that last store constantly played some weird radio station over the speakers, and I couldn't figure out how to shut it off. The music was unsettling. There was never any singing, just instrumentals. They were slow, almost soothing in the mornings. And then they would be more upbeat in the afternoons. But at night, they would play dark, bone-chilling symphonies. Those were far beyond simple elevator music. Those sounded like Satan's personal orchestra. I was usually relieved when the woman came on to talk. She was the same one from the gas pumps. A monitor hanging in the back corner would turn on to show her reports, but I couldn't change the channel or get it to turn on any other time. She usually doesn't appear after the evening news, but I guess it makes sense there would be a final call. Then, Olivia O'Neill was back with another special announcement.
Greetings, Grass Grovers. Thank you for choosing Last Stop Station. The store will be closing in 10 minutes. Please gather your final purchases and calmly proceed to the exit in single file. There is no need to shove or shout. The cleaners will not arrive until 12:01 a.m. Cyrus be with you.
It was hard to focus on what she said. I was too busy looking at her eyes. I could have been hallucinating, but it looked like they had turned black. I don't know what color they used to be, but they were definitely normal eyes all the other times I saw her, not pitch black orbs. I was hoping it would end quickly, like a shot to the head. There 1 second, gone the next. Hell, the only time I tried to eat a bullet, I couldn't pull the trigger. I kept talking myself out of it and ended up stashing the gun under the counter. I couldn't get rid of it, but I didn't want to look at it anymore. At 11:59, I was racing the clock to drink myself unconscious and thought I had succeeded when everything suddenly went dark. But it only lasted for a second. Just as quickly, a silent red siren descended from the ceiling, and the strobing light made me so dizzy I puked all over my shoes. I glanced at the clock in time to watch the last 5 seconds tick down. At the stroke of midnight, the siren receded into the ceiling. The lights came back, brighter than ever, and white spots were still dancing in my vision. The automatic door slid open. I almost puked again as several white, blurry blobs entered the station and split off in every direction. Seeing them file in was a sobering moment, but I was too far gone to articulate sensible speech while panicking. I tried to ask who they were, what they wanted, but there's no telling what I actually said, and they were never going to talk regardless. They advanced, and I retreated. When I backed into the counter, I went over and continued crawling for as much distance as possible. My vision was finally clearing, and I felt a slight relief upon realizing the intruders were only humans wearing some kind of hazmat suits and not stranded. I'm not sure why, but I've named the one who came at me Al. He was the only one to acknowledge my existence. None of the others even glanced my way. Some were restocking shelves, while others were cleaning, and that's when I remembered the thing about cleaners arriving at 12:01. Have you ever seen a movie where they check for radiation with little machines that click and beep? Well, these guys had some that looked like they were from the 50s. I thought they were little radios at first. They had handles sticking out of the top with a few dials on either side, and there was a detachment that looked like a microphone without a mouthpiece. I couldn't help but let out a slight yelp when Al finally had me cornered. I begged him not to hurt me, and it took several seconds to realize he wasn't. He was scanning me. After his machine failed to detect whatever it was he was looking for, he put it away and reached towards me. Not in a fast or threatening manner, but casual, and placed both hands on my hips. When I felt his fingers close, I thought, I guess it's not important what I thought, but I screamed for real that time. Every head in the station turned to stare, but didn't seem angry, only creepy. All the machines were turned off by this point, so there was a complete silence when Al replaced his hands on my hips, and, in one smooth motion, pulled my shirt over my head. I'm not sure why I lifted my arms. I guess it was a reflex. After dropping my shirt onto the ground, Al unbuttoned my pants. I was outnumbered more than 10-1, and there was no way I could fight them all off. I salvaged what little dignity remained by throwing my own pants on the ground. It was my only choice. They proceeded to take my belongings from me. My socks, shoes, boxers, even my gun and bag were added to the pile. I was scanned and cleared once more before being pushed outside. It hadn't felt like I went anywhere, but the station was suddenly in a warehouse with enough lighting to imitate the sun. The surrounding metal walls were a perfect fit, as if they were built after the station was placed there. It felt like being on the set of a movie studio. My car was still parked next to the pump, and a team of cleaners were busy going through it. I was considering a way to get one of them alone. Finding clothes was my top priority, even if it was one of those weird suits. That's when I noticed what was beyond the parking lot. A wide, concrete path. I could follow it to the right or left. There were no doors, just trimmed openings in the walls, and when standing on the path, I could see for miles in either direction with no end in sight. I didn't know what to do, but thankfully I didn't have to wonder for long. As I looked to the left once more, what I thought to be a solid wall opened up in a doorway. It scared me at first, and I was prepared to run in the other direction when a man suddenly stepped out and waved me over. It was comforting to see he wasn't dressed like a cleaner, but that's not what made me trust him. I trusted him because he wore the same look of terror I imagined wearing myself. His eyes searched the tunnel like something could appear any second, and I wasn't ready to learn what put that terror on his face. When I was close enough, he pulled me through the door and slammed it shut. I found myself in what I can only describe as an Amazon warehouse. It was like the mother of all Sam's Clubs, and we were surrounded by shelves of trash bags and paper towels. I didn't know what to say, so I opted for standing silently with my hands awkwardly covering my junk.
Here, man. Use this for now, and I'll take you to grab some clothes before we split. I'm Doug, by the way.
He ripped open a bag of industrial-sized trash bags and tossed one over. I wrapped it around my waist and introduced myself as he led us through endless aisles of random supplies. Occasionally, he paused to put something into his bag, but we never stopped for more than a few seconds. He was thin and a few inches taller than me, with long hair pulled back into a man bun. And he wore an orange shirt with white and blue flower print board shorts. I'd think he were my age, but his deep voice made him sound older. His pack was the kind campers take on week-long excursions, and it looked like it couldn't fit one more item without bursting a seam. I had countless questions, but no clue where or how to begin. Finally, I settled for, where are we?
That's a pretty loaded question, my friend. If you're here, you must have stayed in a station past the midnight count, which means the cleaners came and took your clothes away. That was the worst part for me, but it doesn't look like you fought back. Smart man. Check this out.
He lifted his shirt to reveal a nasty, circular burn scar slightly larger than a quarter. When a cleaner reached for his pants, Doug punched him in the head. This resulted in a second cleaner producing what appeared to be a police baton, but it was actually something closer to a cattle prod. He described the sensation as being electrocuted with a branding iron, and it instantly rendered him unconscious. When he woke, he was lying on a concrete pathway just beyond the station's parking lot, and his entire body felt like it was on fire. Knowing he couldn't stay there, he began crawling through the tunnel. Exactly how long have you been here? The realization he had been trapped there for long enough for that wound to heal added a new layer of fear to the situation.
No telling. It's too easy to lose track of time around here. You'll try to count the Sundays for a while, but it's impossible. There's no windows to know if it's day or night, and if you get a new watch or phone, you'll find they're useless in most places. Watches don't work at all, and phones seem to change at random pending your location.
It was difficult to appreciate the magnitude of his words. A sea of clothes racks were just ahead, and walking through a store naked can be terribly distracting. Are we alone here? Are there more cleaners? What about the stranded? Please tell me those other things.
We're alone, for now. All the cleaners are out prepping the stations for another week of service, and will be long gone before the first group returns. I only come here once in a while to restock supplies, and sometimes I pick up bits of information along the way. On this occasion, I heard there was another quitter in the tunnels, and decided to see if I could catch your eye. I wouldn't have come out or shouted to you, though. Nothing personal. I just can't take these kinds of risks. Anyway, put on some clothes, and don't leave this spot. I'll be back in 60 seconds.
Wait, no! I didn't have a clue what he was doing. I thought he was leaving me, but I had to get dressed before chasing after him. There was no telling when or if I would have another opportunity. I grabbed the first of everything I saw in my size and dressed as quickly as possible. In the end, I had an electric blue version of Doug's station shirt, a gray and red version of his shorts, and black flip-flops. I still can't believe there wasn't a single pair of jeans. It all looked typical of what you'd expect to find in the gas stations off busy interstates that sell unusual souvenirs to travelers. I was debating on what to do when I saw Doug headed back with an extra bag slung over his shoulder.
Here, pack some extra clothes. Sundays are the only day it's safe to enter the hub. Essentially, this is where the cleaners live, and if you were caught in their home, they'll put you on the shelves too. I promise you don't want that.
He cringed just thinking about it, and I didn't press the issue. But how do we get out? I've been away from home for too long. My family must think I'm dead.
Sorry, man. You may want to say goodbye to your old life. It's easier that way. Some people even choose a new name, but we all grieve differently. Just do what feels right for you.
But what is this place? It doesn't make any sense. Where are we? I didn't care if my voice was cracking. I needed real answers. Doug checked his watch for the 100th time and let out a long, deep sigh.
I'll tell you what I've heard, but it's up to you whether or not to believe it. Plus, we're almost out of time, so keep moving or get left behind.
That was fine. After everything I'd experienced, I thought I was ready to believe anything.
Have you ever heard any of the game legends? The ones where you do something incredibly dangerous for a chance to win something from the devil? It's usually a wish or some kind of fortune, but there's a ton of them. The Infinity Game and Midnight Game are fairly popular, for example.
Like Bloody Mary or Candyman? I did not like where this was going.
Well, sort of. You're on the right track, but those are fake and only for a scare. The ones I'm talking about are all too real. The first thing you need to accept is that demons exist. They come in all shapes and sizes, but there's a group of elites that are uncontested in power, almost godlike. Souls are the currency, nourishment, and fuel that sustain their powers, but collecting them can get a little tricky. A demon can't simply take a soul by force. It must be freely given. And even the humans who don't believe in souls tend to get protective when asked point blank to part with one. So what do? They create a situation that makes you want to give it away. You follow me?
Sort of? You mean like the Devil's Crossroads, or the thing with the golden fiddle?
Closer, but they hadn't done things that way for decades. Business was slow. People weren't buying into it anymore. You know what they say about things too good to be true, but if you had an element of change, something to balance the effort with the reward, then people believe it.
So, somewhere in this maze of madness, you're saying there's a demon who will send me home in exchange for my soul. It was a shitty deal, but one I was prepared to take. That's how badly I missed my family.
Hell no, man. This game isn't active. It's just a relic of the past no one bothered to shut down. There was no rhyme or reason to getting here. It was practically based on chance. The asshole running it made himself a new game where suckers alternate turning left and right in order to play. I don't know what happens after that, but it's clearly more lucrative than this place. Now we're just stuck here while everything essentially runs on autopilot.
It took me a few minutes to respond. It's not that I didn't believe him. No other explanation fit the scenario. I was just shocked. Does that mean the cleaners are the only danger down here? I knew it was too good to be true when I said it. But I don't know. What else do you say at a time like that? He could have simply said no. He didn't have to laugh.
I wish. This place wouldn't be half bad if...
He stopped suddenly and reversed, pulling me with him. The sound of footsteps could be heard in the distance, and they were getting louder. The aisle we were on contained packs of bottled water, lined beneath the bottom shelf, and Doug rushed to clear a space among them. I helped as soon as I understood his intent, but I never thought we would actually fit. Thank goodness I was wrong. There was a 4-foot space beneath the stack, and it ran the full length of the aisles we were sandwiched between. Once we crawled under the shelf, we pulled the water back in to cover our entrance and waited in silence as the cleaners continued to draw closer. That's when we realized there was another sound mixed in with the footsteps. One we couldn't quite identify until it was only a few yards away. It was the sound of something wet and sticky being dragged across the floor, but nothing was distinguishable between the small cracks of our hiding place. Doug already knew what it was. I could tell by the look on his face, but he only shook his head at my curious stare. We waited until they were well out of our vicinity before crawling out, and the thick blood streaks confirmed the fear I wouldn't acknowledge. Why didn't they just kill me right away if this was the endgame? I didn't expect to get an answer, but there actually was one.
Because they weren't programmed to kill humans collected from stations. They're meant to strip us for conversion. When the game was still active, it was crawling with low-level demons who would take the humans away once they were naked. Nobody knows exactly what was done to them, but when they came back, they were cleaners. They didn't speak, they just do as they're programmed. No exceptions.
Then why did they kill whoever this was? There's no way someone survived that much blood loss.
That person must have been in here, getting supplies like we are. Every tunnel connects to this place. It's the supply hub. In here, cleaners are only programmed to restock loose items. And so far as they can tell, humans are basically livestock, so they're taken to meat processing.
With each shocking revelation, I became slightly more numb to the panic. I had already reached that very point less than 24 hours before, but when I survived the countdown, it restored a sliver of hope. Then I saw people in hazmat suits, like some kind of officials, and for the briefest moment, I thought they were going to help. I wanted to crush that sliver of hope when my clothes were taken, but Doug appeared, and the damn thing grew. It took a minute for everything he said to really sink in and snuff the hope out at its roots. Part of me just wanted to assess the easiest way to die and get it over with. How big is this place? What else is out there?
It's endless. Don't you get it? We aren't on Earth. We aren't even in the same universe. We're basically in limbo. You can look behind every door, but you're never going to find a way out. No matter what kind of room you stumble across, you're still in the tunnels. Never forget that.
He showed a little emotion with the last sentence, and I realized he had probably been an entirely different man before that place. We turned down an aisle of garden supplies, and there was an exit sign above a rusty door on the back wall. Doug took one last look around and handed me a pair of shears before removing a large hunting knife that had been concealed beneath his shirt.
Sorry we didn't have time for a real weapon, but this is better than nothing.
Are guns the only thing they don't stock in this place, or are you just really good with that thing? I nodded towards his knife while trying to find a comfortable way to wield my shears.
Oh, there's plenty of guns and ammo, but you don't want to use it. Some of the low-level demons stayed behind to play alpha. If they hear a gunshot, they call for backup, and everyone comes running. We've lost a lot of good people that way, and now we avoid firearms completely. Never forget, they don't have the power to grant big wishes, but that won't stop them from saying they do.
Wait, we? So you're with the group? How many? We could probably take down the cleaners without guns. If we can take over the hub...
Don't talk that way. It's suicide. You think it hasn't been tried? You think you're the first person desperate to get home? There were 7 people in the group that found us, but today, there's 5, and not one of them are the same. Within the first year, each of the original 7 died, along with quite a few others, and most of it can't even be blamed on demons.
We crept out, and we were in an identical tunnel as before, endless in each direction. I'm sorry about your friends. I didn't know what to say.
Listen, I'm going to tell you the most important rule to survival. Never let them see you. They won't tolerate humans running loose in their deranged kingdom. Once they know you exist, the entire pack won't rest until they've hunted you down. And, Jesse, they don't need to sleep.
That struck some life back into my terror. So what else is down here? Where are we supposed to hide when we can't in the hub?
The other rooms. I'm going to show you how to find them. Look at where we just came from. Do you see the door's outline? Your eyes will get used to spotting the straight lines faster than you think. You'll want to pick something close to a hub entrance, but never stay in one place too long. And if you ever see a thick, black, slimy residue or smell rotten meat, leave the area as quickly and quietly as possible. That means a demon is nearby.
That time, his choice of words was unmistakable. I wasn't being invited to join the group. I'm not a particularly sensitive or petty man, but the prospect of being alone in those tunnels, I couldn't process it. Oh, I get it. I guess I didn't make the cut for your exclusive club, huh? The face he made in return was raw and powerful. I almost wanted to apologize, but it was hard to feel sympathetic under the circumstances. Then, his words cut me to the bone.
No disrespect. You seem like a nice guy, but I don't trust strangers anymore. All I have left is my wife, and no other man is ever going near her again. Okay? Whether you understand it yet or not, you're fucking lucky to be alone.
It didn't take a detective to put those pieces together, and it was an impossible point to argue. I wouldn't have trusted him either. There was only one thing left to say. Got any more tips?
Play the odds. The tunnels are endless. We don't know how many demons are out there, but as long as you keep moving, you probably won't run into one. If you bunker down in one place, something will eventually stumble across you. When we change locations, we walk 6 hours before looking for the next hub entrance. Then, we check the doors closest to it for a place to rest until the next station clean. And be very careful about who you trust. New people show up every week, and even good people can do horrible things when they're desperate.
His words brought back memories of Rob, but I pushed them down deep where they belong. Wait, but how do I keep track of the days? And when we first met, you said you heard there was a new quitter. What did that mean? Who did you hear it from? We were walking side by side with our heads close together, whispering in hushed tones. But I had to restrain myself from shouting at the end. I was being expected to process too much too quickly, and the threat of a full-blown panic attack was looming ever closer.
Every room plays the same radio channel you heard in the station. I'm not sure why it doesn't work in the hub, but I guess the cleaners don't need it. And we are quitters. We stayed in the station because we wanted to quit playing without making it to the final level. It's practically a game over screen. As for who told me about you, well, there are a few people who want to put the cleaners out of their misery, and they don't care if they die in the process. They tend to take extreme risks, like stealing cleaner uniforms and infiltrating their ranks. If one ever approaches you with both hands palms up, that's the signal. Try to help them if you can. They're doing good work. I know I would want to be put down if it were me.
I was trying to commit each word to memory, but I could only think of walking those dim tunnels alone. So much so that I nearly missed the fine, door-shaped cracks next to where Doug had stopped. I guess this is where we go our separate ways. Thanks for everything. Really. I'd already be dead without you. Do you mind demonstrating how these things open before I go? My voice came out less steady than I hoped.
Just push. Don't forget about the sludge. If you need to escape, run to the closest door and immediately find a different exit. Then, find another door and another exit. Do it at least 4 or 5 times. All the tunnels are straight. The only way to change direction is by cutting through a room. And good luck.
We shook hands before he disappeared into what looked like a 90s hotel lobby, and I caught a glimpse of his wife as the door closed. She had a jagged scar across her throat, and that's when I knew Doug had been right. I was lucky to be alone. I wandered the endless tunnels for hours, hoping I'd have the willpower to resist running away when I finally crossed paths with a demon. I wasn't interested in living out the rest of my life in a monster's playground, but I was still terrified of dying. Since I wouldn't be able to hang or shoot myself, I hoped a demon could take the matter out of my hands. Never underestimate your survival instincts, folks. I continued walking under the dim, blinking lights, and the first time they went completely dark, I thought something was coming. All my big talk vanished as I began throwing myself into the wall, searching for a door. In that moment, there was no remembering, but this is what I wanted. I was in a full panic, running off pure instinct and fighting to survive with everything I had. Then, the light suddenly flickered back to life, and there was nothing in sight. As it turns out, this was a fairly common occurrence in the tunnels. I wasn't too worried about failing my first test, though. After all, what chance did I stand out there alone? I didn't expect to make it another day, let alone weeks, though it seemed like a lot longer. It was Thursday, June 16th, when I got lost in the Backroads, and I came home yesterday, August 11th. Just under a month, but it feels like years. Those rooms really could be anything, and they were completely random. The first night, I stayed in a rundown bowling alley, but they had things from the past and present. Fantasy and reality, nothing was off limits. And I've slept on benches in bus stations. When you have no one to share the good things with, stuff like that loses all meaning fast. I was leaving the White House yesterday when I noticed clumps of black sludge staining the walls ahead and dripping from the ceiling. The first spots were only 20 to 30 feet away, and they extended at least that much further. The lights near it were going out. The ones still lit were dimming by the second, but at the very edge of the darkness, I could still make out a tall, humanoid shape. I threw myself into the closest room, which happened to be an old rubber factory, wound my way through broken machinery, and found the other exit. The new tunnel was clean, but I went through a bank, airport, and carnival too. When I entered the third clean tunnel, I walked ahead a few yards and chose one more door. I had no clue if the shape I saw really was a demon or if it saw me, but the fresh terror I felt at the prospect erased any lingering notions of running into one on purpose. Though, with the way things turned out, I should probably be thanking the damn thing. The last door led outside. It wasn't like the station or airport where the small, outdoor areas were still under a roof. There was actually a sky, and it looked exactly like the paved streets of the Backroads. The fresh air was absolutely delicious, and I took my time searching for the exit. In fact, I was still searching 2 hours later. At one point, I even let myself believe I was actually out of the tunnels, but that hope was squashed when I reached the crossroads. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and it grew darker by the second as I advanced. I knew it was different from the Backroads then, and I knew I should turn back, but I couldn't. The door was gone, and there was nothing but miles of deserted highway behind me. A bright flash of lightning revealed a dark figure in the center of the crossroads. There was something about the way it stood, facing me, that made it seem like it was waiting to speak. The one in the tunnel had been hunched over like a rabid beast, waiting to strike out for its next meal. Or maybe that's what the new one wanted me to think. It was like looking into a humanoid-shaped black hole. Where its face should have been, there was only a vortex of even blacker swirls, and looking at it was like falling into a bottomless pit. It said it was the original game owner, and still preferred to operate in the old ways when possible. It wanted to know if I'd be interested in trading my soul for being with my family again, and boy, was I interested. All it took was a simple prick of the finger, a few drops of blood on a dotted line, and we were good to go. With a wave of its hand, the sky cleared, and a new door suddenly appeared behind us. It opened onto my front yard, and I ran through it without another glance at the demon. Everything looked and smelled exactly how it should be, and my wife's car was in the driveway. She knew there was more to my story than getting lost, but she gave me time with the kids before making me explain, and I appreciated that. I did my best to tell her what happened, but now she wants me to see a psychologist. She's been on the phone all day trying to schedule one around the police visit. An officer was supposed to stop by to speak with us so we can officially close the missing persons report, but I guess he's running late. I'm not complaining though. I never want to leave this house again. Call it PTSD or whatever you want. I just have this overwhelming sense of dread that something awful will happen the second we try to go somewhere. The whole thing really messed up my dad too. He didn't sound like himself, and even my mother-in-law seemed shaken by the ordeal. I feel horrible for the trouble I've caused everyone, but... shit. I gotta go. There's another problem. My wife called the police station, and they were saying the cop already came, but nobody answered the door. Can you believe this crap? Then the call dropped in the middle of their conversation, and now the lines are busy. What a joke. Hey again. I'm glad the last update got out before everything fell apart. Please, you're our only hope. I never made it home. We are not safe, and it's not just me anymore. I've brought my entire family to hell, and we only have one chance to escape. We need you to call the Baton Rouge Police Department in Louisiana so they can coordinate a military response. The National Guard won't be enough. We need SEALs, Green Berets, Air Force, everything. They should have already opened a case, but they'll never figure out what happened without help. They need to know my family is here too. My kids are so young. Milo just had his 8th birthday, and Chloe is only 6, and my wife, Paula, she's never going to forgive me. Her words echo in my brain like a nightmare. All day they creep in like parasites nibbling on my very sanity, and soon there won't be anything left.
I hate you.
It was difficult to explain this place to her, but then we had to explain it to the kids. Chloe still doesn't fully understand, and Milo treated it like a game until we had a close call, but I'll come back to that. He was the only one not suffering from nightmares, but now we're lucky to get 3 hours. Paula and I take turns keeping watch. Most of the time, nothing happens. This place is so big, it's almost like running into someone in the middle of the ocean. But when you inevitably do, you move or die. Bit by bit, the illusion fell apart. At first, everything was exactly as it should be. We had contact with the outside world. I mean, we thought we were home. Chloe and Milo's height marks were still scratched into the wall. Even our pillows smelled the same. We were so happy, so relieved. But if you heard my last post, you know we're having some trouble with the police. They were supposed to send officers out to take my statement. Then they started messing with us, saying they did go, but nobody was home. We thought it was because they didn't believe my story, which was fine. We sure as hell don't believe it. But we had to tell someone, you know? We couldn't just sit on this information. People are dying. People who are assumed dead. Who have family members searching for them. They're trapped here, like us. But when Paula told the officer he must have been at the wrong house, he got an attitude. And I realized I would need to go into town to make my statement in person, which I fully intended to do in the morning, but nothing could have torn me away from home that night. I'm actually grateful for the decision to wait. Learning our fate sooner wouldn't have changed anything, and it gave us precious time together that may very well turn out to be our final happy memories. We stayed up late, slept in, ate a huge breakfast, and loafed around until lunchtime. I planned to go to the police station, make my statement regardless of what people thought. Then I was going to pick up a pizza on the way home. Simple, right?
This is your fault.
In the shock of everything else happening, I forgot my vehicle was still at the station until I tried to leave, and Paula's car was the only option. Wondering what I would say on the insurance claim was a renewed source of stress, but now it seems funny to say that. This is actually the first time I've thought about it again, because immediately after, I learned our car didn't start. I'm no mechanic, but when you live paycheck to paycheck, you learn to survive off of YouTube tutorials, so I can do some basic things. The first problem I found was a dead battery, but the car had turned into a total lemon overnight. The back tires were flat, there wasn't a drop of oil in the engine, and the belt was rotted through. I'm sure there was more to it, but I didn't see a point in checking. Next, I tried searching for a tow truck, but in my heart, I think I already understood what was happening before my phone went completely dead. The electricity and water followed immediately after, and then the cosmetics began to crumble. We were living in a rundown shack sitting in the middle of a dead forest clearing, and the sky was turning blacker with each passing day. It was more difficult for Paula to accept. She hadn't lived through the hell of this place like I had. She didn't even believe my story at first. She thought I was experiencing some kind of mental break due to extreme trauma. Which is fair, but it didn't make the Backroads any less real. I don't think she was fully convinced until the Saturday night broadcast played through every TV in the house, and she had to see Olivia O'Neill in the flesh.
Tidings, tunnel traipsers. Are you ready for another Sunday morning run to the hub? Make sure to stretch those muscles beforehand, and don't forget to avoid peak hours. Unless, of course, are you searching for purpose in your new life, but aren't quite sure where to begin? Well, look no further, because now you can be a cleaner. No need to apply. Simply approach any tunnel staffer and say hello. We welcome ages 3+, with no questions asked. Cyrus be with you.
Paula's entire outlook changed when she heard that. She finally let go of the Bible rapture, and we discussed actual ideas for how to proceed. It was progress anyway, but none of the plans were great. We knew we couldn't stay. We knew we'd need supplies, and we knew there was no safe way to split up. How would we ever find one another again if we were forced to run? How long would they try to wait if I didn't return? Maybe Doug had found a way he could live with, but we couldn't bring ourselves to take the risk. We had to stay together. Ultimately, we remained in our imaginary house for almost 2 weeks. We should have left sooner. It's just, where were we gonna go? Doug was right about one thing, though. Well, pretty much everything, but he was especially right about not staying in one place. After that announcement, we spent the next day packing as much as we could carry. You know things are serious when you're calculating how much weight a 6-year-old can handle. We planned to leave the next morning, but didn't even make it to nightfall. I was gathering anything that could be utilized as a weapon, and Paula was upstairs with the kids when a gust of wind shook the windows and caused her to look up. Her scream made my blood run cold. In all our years together, I'd never heard her scream that way. I don't even remember moving. I only remember suddenly being next to her. She was staring out of the window, and the children were crying into her waist. I knew whatever she saw meant our time was up.
We're only here because of you.
Did you know that there are actually varying degrees of black? Vanta black, for example, is one of the darkest. It absorbs 99.965% of light. At least that's what I've learned on YouTube. I've never been exceptionally intelligent, so don't quote me. But that's all I could think about when I saw this thing. The sky was left as a field of gray clouds, except for this sinister black hole with tendrils still feeding it. It was growing, and it felt hungry. Maybe it sounds dramatic to call every new instance of terror as indescribable, but these things never get easier to explain. It was like someone sucked the darkness from the clouds and condensed it into one super black hole. We had to get out. Paula was in shock, but we didn't have time for that, and we shared a silent look of understanding. There was no good way to go. We simply had to pick up our packs and run away, on foot, in the open. Neither of us expected to make it very far, but each pretended for the other's sake. We carried the children, as if running would actually make a difference, but I think we just wanted to be holding them when the end came. Is it wrong that I hoped to go first? Probably, but these days I'm pretty numb to stuff like that. The second we stepped outside, a blast of wind reminiscent of Hurricane Katrina struck and nearly took us down. but we stayed on our feet and kept moving. Debris flew all around us, and every speck of dirt was like a tiny razor blade sliding across my skin. Hell, maybe they were razors. We had a fair few cuts when it was over. When we made it to the end of our long driveway, the road no longer continued for miles ahead as it had when I first arrived. Now, it simply ended, like we were inside a giant warehouse and this was but one room. The tunnels were back, stretching left to right in an endless corridor, exactly the same as when I first ran from the gas station. Man, that feels like years ago already. I ushered Paula towards the left, just because it seemed closer, and I dared one last look back before our home was out of sight forever. The shingles were pulled from the roof into the vortex, and the entire house looked mere seconds from following.
I wish you would have died in the tunnels.
Once behind the tunnel wall, all wind and sound were cut off completely, as if a giant door was slammed shut. Except it wasn't a door. The opening was gone, and we were left in the dimly lit backroom maintenance tunnels, exactly where I'd left off. But we didn't find the hub that week. I taught Paula and the kids how to look for the straight lines to find doorways, and warned them of the rotten smells and black slime. But there's no better teacher than experience, and that came soon enough. For days we wandered aimlessly, stopping to spend the night in any room offering the illusion of comfort. When the next Sunday report came, we were in something that resembled a Hollywood movie studio. There were multiple stages set in different scenes, all of it fake. The furniture was cardboard, the food was plastic, and none of the lighting worked, but it wasn't cold, and that's come to be good enough. We'd been lucky in the tunnels up to that point. We hadn't run into anyone or anything since leaving our house behind, but that changed at the hub. We were only inside for a few minutes when a set of arms shot from an aisle as we passed. Chloe only let out a short screech when the man snatched her away. That's how frightened she was of being loud. Her tiny hand was ripped from mine, and time froze the instant my fingers closed onto thin air. Paula lunged for the man as he darted away with our daughter, and I leapt over her body when she sprawled to the floor. The only sounds made were those of running feet as I gained on the stranger, inch by agonizing inch. When I thought he was within reach, I threw myself forward. For one fraction of a second, I held a fistful of the man's shirt, and with it came a euphoric rush of relief, greater than the moment I first saw my family again. But then, my insides disintegrated as the coarse fabric slipped from my grasp, and I crashed to the floor empty-handed. I screamed then, because I knew I wouldn't catch him. I may have laid there in the middle of the cat food aisle until the cleaners came had a miracle not occurred. Out of nowhere, two teens came running from the opposite direction and collided with Chloe's kidnapper. The four bodies became a tangled mass of limbs, all struggling to free themselves, and my baby slipped right through. The two teens were already in a panic before the collision, and the piece of shit who had grinned so disgustingly when he snatched my daughter was now a picture of red rage as he threw his fist into the young boy's face. The kid's nose sprayed them both with blood, and his girlfriend, or whoever she was, couldn't hold back her screams any longer. In the same instant, the man saw me scoop Chloe into my arms, and he clapped his hand over the young girl's mouth, cutting her cries off mid-wail. As if deciding to cut his losses, he used the other hand to slam the boy's head into the ground. The kid went still with the wet crack it made on impact, and I didn't stay to see more. I couldn't help that girl. I couldn't even help my own family. We ran into Paula and Milo after turning our first corner, but there was no time for a reunion. I wanted to get us all as far away from that spot and that poor kid's body. We heard the girl scream twice more, but we pretended not to. I'm ashamed to say I only felt relief it wasn't my daughter. That's what this place does to you. It takes everything good and rots it from the inside out. Honestly, I'm not even ashamed. I only know I should be. We collected anything that seemed useful on our way out, but we didn't stick around to shop. Maybe Doug's method is better after all, but there's no time to dwell on the concept. It was only a few minutes later when the tunnel lights began to flicker. I moved to check the rooms near us, knowing in my gut this wasn't a random blackout, and sure enough, the smell of rotten meat was unmistakable. The place we entered was rare. It's the only other outside room I've seen since the crossroads, and this one was... it was sort of beautiful, even under the circumstances. Paula gasped in disbelief. There was a sky instead of a ceiling, and a crescent moon glowed like a nightlight among millions of shining stars. It was warm, but a gentle breeze kept it at the perfect temperature. The air was fresh and clean instead of stale and damp. Mushrooms of every size and color outnumbered the trees 2 to 1. Some were tall as a house, others littered the forest floor like patches of clover. There was also a slightly sinister feel to it. Not in appearance, but the atmosphere. The total lack of sound was unnatural for a forest. Our brains have default expectations in regards to certain things, and mine simply couldn't comprehend the absence of wildlife. Nothing moved in the brush, no birds sang, no crickets chirped. There was only the light breeze. Stunned as we were by the sights, we couldn't stop. We moved further in and soon found ourselves at a cool, freshwater stream. To be clear, outdoor scenery might be a rarity, but toxic pools are not. Sometimes they're obviously poisoned, like the green and slimy ones. Other times they look completely innocent until the taste of acidic copper fills your mouth and the burn of 1,000 suns courses through your body. We followed the stream to a lake where morning mist still swirled atop its surface, and that's when Chloe collapsed. I knelt beside her, and Milo fainted to my left. Paula opened her mouth as if to scream, but her eyes rolled to the back of her head, and she fell forward across Chloe's small legs. I only had time to be confused for a second before the world began to spin. One moment I was looking at my unconscious family, and the next, I was flat on my back, and a woman was standing over me. That's how I met Delphi.
Damn. More humans.
Upon waking, we were inside a small furnished cabin, yet the 4 of us were lying side by side on a hard wooden floor, and the woman I saw earlier was watching from the corner. I sat up quickly at the memory of collapsing, relieved to find my family was also beginning to stir. I didn't have to wait for an explanation either. The woman was eager to get rid of us.
I'm sorry you got knocked out. The incense will clear any lingering effects momentarily. My mushrooms are like guard dogs. Their spores begin seeping into an intruder's pores the moment they enter the forest. It's pretty handy. Makes the cleanup much easier. But you guys are humans, so I'll just kindly ask you to vacate the premises, okay? Bye-bye now.
She seemed annoyed by our presence, as if we were there by choice. Her face was young, too young for the knowing glare behind her eyes. It felt like she was reading my mind, but I couldn't back down. I was too groggy to comprehend everything, but I understood she was asking the impossible. My own head felt like a freight train was plowing through it, and Paula looked, I'll just say she looked the same.
You did this to us.
Tears streamed down Milo and Chloe's face. The art of silent crying is among the first lessons taught in the tunnel. Yet this woman spoke as if we were Bible salesmen. It was infuriating. Not wanting to frighten the kids even more, I tried to keep my voice steady, but my entire body shook as I struggled to my feet. Who are you? Where do you expect us to go? I have a family. What's with you people down here? How are you all so perfectly okay with throwing other humans to the wolves? We're all trapped down here. If everyone worked together and formed a community, maybe we could actually find a way out. Did you ever consider that? I must have sounded ridiculous. I was out of breath, my knees were trembling, and I could tell my words had no effect on her. She never blinked, never flinched. I wanted to make her feel ashamed, but there wasn't a drop of feeling left inside her human shell.
Oh my. Someone's clearly never seen The Walking Dead. Look, if you must address me, you may use the name Delphi, but barring the fact that you're wrong about the results of teamwork, you're also wrong about everything else. This is my home, and you are trespassing. Again, I understand it wasn't intentional, but, the fact remains, it's time to go. Don't worry, I'll escort you past the other traps.
Her home? Can you believe she said this place was her home? Fancy mushrooms or not, it's too dangerous to stay in one place. We all need to go. I knew this room was too good to be true. There's no such thing as a home down here. Are you new? We ran in here to get away from a demon. It probably followed us inside. We have to go now. I tried to estimate how long we were unconscious. How long had we been laying there? Where did the demon go? Would it have found us already? Was the room large enough that it could have passed us by? And why was the woman not reacting to the danger?
Oh man, you still don't get it. That demon is already dead. The mushrooms knocked it out. I cleaned up the mess. Me, witch. You, human. I live here. You are in my literal home. I don't entertain guests, and I am not looking for roommates. Just solitude. Look, you seem like a decent bunch, but this isn't just the kind of place you make friends, okay? It's easier and safer to be alone. If you fear the tunnels so much, just go back to the paved streets.
And how exactly are we supposed to do that? It's impossible.
The same way that you got here? Duh. God, are you serious? Did you really not think to just go back into the station once the cleaners were gone? Come on, man. You got a family. Think, for fuck's sake. I mean, isn't that what you're always saying? Fuck's sake. It is racing through your mind like a mantra, buddy.
I felt like the dumbest man alive. It seemed so obvious when she said it, especially how she said it. If we could lay low while the cleaners did their thing, we should be able to sneak inside after they leave. Even if we only get back to the paved streets, it would be safer. If I can manage that much, I'll figure out the rest when we get there. Suddenly, I was in a hurry to leave, but how long was left in the day? Did we have time? Can you point us towards the nearest station? Help us inside and you'll never see us again.
No thanks. I'm already never gonna see you again. Besides, you slept all day. It's already too late. You'll need to try next week. Now, come on, time moves differently here. Some rooms have closer ties to the real world, and this is one of them. That's why the clocks work and why I can use the internet. They're exceedingly rare and practically worthless to humans, but the demons call them honey traps, and they're checked often. If you do find one, it's usually the last.
If I had a soul left to sell, I would have traded it on the spot. Who wouldn't? I hate myself for even thinking about it, but part of me wondered if Paula would offer her own. It's not that I wanted her to, I just wanted to get the kids out so bad, but when she actually said it, can you imagine taking the hand of the person you love most and dragging them to hell? Because that's what I've done. I didn't even speak. I just sat quietly and watched it happen. It was like knowing you're having a nightmare, but not being able to wake up from it, except this time it was real.
Tell me, witch, do you deal in souls as well? They seem to be the standard form of currency down here. And though my husband already spent his on the pleasure of our company, I happen to still possess mine. Is there a bargain we could strike?
Now her I like. You would do all right in this world. Alone, I mean. He is dragging you down, sister. You have a mind for this life, but... well, never mind. Let me think. You know what? Yes, perhaps we can make a deal. Come on, follow me downstairs. Oh, it's been a while since I've bottled up a soul. Probably need to consult the old Book of Shadows first. Oh, your partner can stay up here with the young ones. Don't worry, we shan't be long.
The way Paula looked at me before following the witch downstairs was unlike any pain I've endured before or since. It felt like someone sliced my chest open and stabbed 10,000 barb needles into my heart one by one. It's a pain that never fades. The nerve endings are too raw to go numb, and every day serves as a reminder she'll never love me again. When we first met, it took over a year to get out of the friend zone. I thought that was the worst pain imaginable, and granted, it was pretty close, but having the person who called you their soulmate look at you the way she looks at me now, that's the stuff that'll kill you. To know what you had done and then lose it anyway. I don't know what happened in that basement. She won't tell me. The kids and I stared at the door in silence. They wanted to know what was happening, but I couldn't bring myself to speak any more than they could bring themselves to ask. When Paula did emerge from the basement, she refused to meet my eyes. Instead, she comforted the children, and they believed she was okay. But I know when her smile is fake. The witch walked past us without speaking, and Paula followed her silently with the children in tow. I was left to bring up the rear, marching in silent wonder over what my life had become in such a short time. I don't even remember what I was doing the day I drove into the Backroads. It was just a regular day. There was nothing special about it. No reason for it to stick out among the others. By all rights, it should have been lost to time. But now it's me who's lost.
It was a pleasure doing business.
Within minutes, we were standing before a giant mushroom with a red door in its stalk, and I followed my family back into the tunnels without so much as a backwards glance at what had seemed to be our only hope.
I lost everything because of you.
I may never know what happened in that basement, but I did learn the result. When we finally settled in a dank cellar and got the kids to sleep, Paula removed a wadded piece of parchment from her blouse. It wasn't paper, though. It was more like leather, too thick to tear, but soft enough to fold. It appeared blank as she flattened it onto the floor, but then lines began to appear. They weren't forming words, but shapes. It was a map. Apparently, Paula possessed just enough magic to make it work. If anyone else tries to use it, nothing happens. I guess that was the trade, that bit of magic. There are no labels, not exactly. The tunnels are just skinny lines, and the rooms are blank squares, but the stations are supposed to glow yellow, and the hub is a bright green. Likewise, honey traps are blood red, but that also means resources, which is why I took this chance to be in one tonight, 1 week later. It's a really nice library, actually. It has computers and an internet connection, unlike the last 2 traps. Anyway, we can't stay down here another night. The things we've endured these last 2 days alone. Well, if we didn't have this chance to escape, let's just say I'm not sure what I'd do. There comes a point when you begin to wonder if it would be kinder to... Did you know that when wars were fought in the past, some rulers would poison their children before the enemy overtook the castle? It was a kinder death. Kinder than what the soldiers would do. But that doesn't matter, because we're leaving in a few hours.
I could kill you myself.
I needed to get the word out ahead of us. We're going to make it back to the paved road. I know it in my bones. But there's one problem I haven't told Paula about. We don't have a vehicle, and I can't count on finding one. So that means we can never leave the station without becoming stranded. Which means we'll be right back where we started in exactly 1 week. Which means we'll be right back where we started in exactly 1 week, and we'll have to do this all over again. Please, I'm begging you, I can't. We just can't. Not again. Someone, please, find a way to save us before next Sunday. We're counting on you. Hey again, everyone. You're all probably wondering if we made it back to the paved streets or what's going on. So let me just pick up where we left off last time. Otherwise, I'll be hopping all over the place and you'll just end up more confused. I've learned a bunch of technical stuff that I'm sure some of you have wondered about yourselves. First, you may remember that I sent the last update from a library. On the way out, I noticed a sign that read Occult and grabbed an armful of books. One title in particular, Soul Harvest, bore significant relevance to our situation, and I found myself reading it after Paula went to sleep. I meant to tell her about it so many times since, but I'm not sure I'll ever find the courage. She already hates me so much, but she recently began to soften in front of the kids, and I don't want to lose that progress. Just to recap, she and I have both sold our souls. Do you understand what that means? We didn't. I sold mine weeks, maybe months before her, but nothing seemed different. I thought I would eventually go to hell, but it didn't matter. What hell could be worse than the tunnels? Look, I'm not sure what I believed before all this happened, and I don't expect you to alter your entire belief system based on the word of a random, possibly deranged stranger. But I've been through too much to just write it all off as a coincidence or superstition. According to the book, hell doesn't even exist. At least, not in the traditional sense. There are places like it, but the system doesn't work like you'd expect. There's a few different things that could happen after you die, but reincarnation is the most common. I won't try to explain the other parts, but when you sell your soul, they don't take the entire soul right away. They only take a piece of it. Otherwise, you would drop dead on the spot, and any deal made would be rendered void. This way, when you do die, your soul will automatically seek out its missing piece. Once the buyer has your entire soul, they can do whatever they want. They can fuel darker magics or place your soul into another vessel, one they will then control like a puppet. That vessel could be a dead body, an unborn child, an animal, or even a golem. I don't know what a golem is, but I know that I don't want to be one. Of course, the buyer always keeps a small piece of you for themselves. That way, the process can be repeated infinitely. If there's a way to break the cycle, I haven't learned of it yet. The book failed to specify if we would remember selling our souls, but I have a sinking feeling the answer is no. Basically, if I don't find a solution during this lifetime, I'm probably screwed for the rest of eternity. I've been having vivid nightmares of living a perfectly normal life as someone else, and then randomly committing an act of terrorism. It makes me wonder about all those mass murderers and serial killers. How many were truly committed with free will? How many really saw the demons they were raving about? Is that my future? I could go down this rabbit hole forever, and I know Paula would too. I just don't see a point in telling her as long as there's nothing we can do about it. Maybe there will be some hope for her. Delphi didn't seem like an evil witch. If nothing else, I don't think she would use Paula to hurt innocent people. I think I would rather be used as a fuel source. Better to not exist at all. Who knows what the demon has planned for me? I was up all night reading that book cover to cover. At least, I think I was. The broadcasts are the only way to tell time, and the time varies with each room, so bear with me. This place is basically Hell's junkyard, just a bunch of strewn about leftovers and remnants from the past. The idea of sneaking back into a station was terrifying enough, but I had to do it with my family. I had to remain calm at the sight of my children interacting with cleaners. The thought of them wearing those tiny white uniforms was too much. We also decided to skip the hub run. Failing to enter the station wasn't really an option, and Paula was certain I wouldn't survive the effort. She was so clinical about it.
If you go to that hub, you will die. Then I'll have to decide how long we wait before leaving without you. Even if we somehow survived, the kids would always question my motives. Besides, we don't need the supplies. Failure isn't an option.
It was hard to argue with her logic, and if I'm honest with myself, I think she was mostly right. Except it's more likely that I would have been injured just badly enough to hold them back. Sometimes Paula knows things before they happen. I used to think the magic was letting her catch glimpses of the future, but that's not it at all. It took me longer to get there, but I understand now. It's common sense. Good old-fashioned common sense. When you do something long enough, you begin to see the patterns. History repeats. Embrace it. Anyways, back to it. The day was dedicated to drilling contingency plans into the kids. They've both matured so much since coming here, but they're still so young. If something happens to Paula and I, well, we prepared them for the possibility as best we can. It would be naive not to. The Sunday midnight announcement was our starting gun. No matter what kind of room you're in, Olivia O'Neill will pop up to ask if you're ready for another run to the hub, even if a screen has to drop out of the ceiling. Her human appearance used to give the kids a semblance of normalcy, but now they've seen her mean face. Chloe cried for 2 days. Those bottomless black eyes haunt her nightmares. Milo, however, wasn't fazed in the slightest. Maybe we should have let Chloe play more Resident Evil and less Mario Kart. We always thought Olivia was giving generic messages to specific sections of the Backroads. It seemed like a local news report type of deal, and most of them sounded like they were pre-recorded. Then, after I don't even know how long, this one was suddenly different. I knew something was wrong when evil Olivia showed up, but her message chilled us.
Tidings, tunnel traipsiers. Does Labyrinth living got you down? Do you miss the relative safety of the paved streets? Did some nasty witch tell you there was a way out? Did you forget that under what conditions the stations leave? Did you let yourself believe there was hope? Well, congratulations, because now Cyrus is watching you.
When the broadcast ended, we all stared at the blank screen in shock. That announcement was clearly directed towards us. There was no denying it. Part of me registered Chloe's cries. They were just so far away, and I failed to act. So did Paula. Every other broadcast had ended with "Cyrus be with you." I've always wondered who he was, but in a hope I never find out kind of way. Of course, I didn't have much time to worry about that. I'm never playing the fool. I thought my big problem was being stranded at a station with no ride, but that wasn't even an issue. The real hurdle is that the station won't leave the hangar until someone runs out of gas. Then there's the matter of who we would meet on the other side. I could see the same gears turning in Paula's head too. All the while, Milo tried to comfort his heartbroken sister. The poor kid will probably never trust again, like any of us will. Our spirits were initially dampened, but the more we thought about it, the better our odds seemed. We never saw stations before we got the map because the doors seal after the cleaners leave. There's not even a seam. We'd been walking right by them the whole time. If we could get inside before the doors sealed, we would theoretically be safe until the station left or the next Sunday rolled around. As for who would be waiting on the other side, we would see them before they saw us. The driver would have to park, and they would probably use the pump first. That gave us plenty of time to check them out before showing ourselves. We felt the potential rewards outweighed the risks. The real trick was getting past the cleaners. We camped out in a 60s middle school band hall. It was the first door past the cleaners' route to the station, and we hoped to sneak inside right after the last one left. The sound of their boots echoing against the stone floor was nerve-wracking. Even though I knew where they were going, it still felt like they were coming for us. Cyrus is watching, after all. But, of course, they didn't. One after the other, they filed into the hangar, and the oppressing sound of their bootsteps faded into the distance. That's when the real wait began. We didn't know if they would be there for an hour or half the day, and we couldn't miss our chance. Paula and I took turns standing at the cracked door, listening. It's impossible to tell how long we were actually there, but we were forced to endure a final round of evil Olivia before
Tidings,
leaving.
tunnel traipsers! Have you made your Sunday hub run? There's still plenty of time to abandon any ill-conceived notions of escape. But you better hurry. The clock is ticking, Palmer family. And don't forget, Cyrus is watching you.
You gotta give credit where it's due. When the broadcast started, Paula and I shared a knowing look, a silent agreement that said her words couldn't affect us. But then she said our names. Yeah, it was already obvious we were getting personalized announcements. It's just, I don't know. It's just different to be called out by name. Our resolve was thoroughly shaken, but not enough to change our minds. Besides, Olivia was trying to set us up. It was maybe 10 more minutes before we finally heard the cleaners leave the station. It was absolutely too late for a hub run. We didn't know how long the hangar doors would stay open, so we had to go right on their heels. I poked my head out to see a dozen cleaners walking away from the station, all staring straight ahead like good little soldiers. Milo took a position directly behind me, and Paula carried Chloe in back. If anything went wrong, they were going to make a run for it while I bought as much time as possible. In the tunnels, guns are usually a death sentence rather than a lifesaver. The sound of a shot fired will bring any demons in the vicinity straight to your location, though if your only goal is to buy time for others to escape, well, in that case, it's nice to have around for emergencies. We moved straight into the hangar doors just as they were closing. 1 second later, and I would have been crushed. Any fear was instantly negated by the security felt in seeing those heavy metal doors seal shut. We made it. We were closed off from the rest of the tunnels. There were no demons or cleaners, just us and a station full of supplies. I was almost afraid to turn and see what kind it was. I would have been grateful for a paved street station. That's the one I really wanted. Sure, I've never been more desperate for a drink in my life, but it wasn't worth the price. I didn't want my family anywhere near those dirt roads, or worse. Can you believe that despite how reasonable I've sounded thus far, part of me truly believed we were home free? I thought we would turn to see a tiny, rundown station and be grateful for its water and soup. We would have been grateful to stay in one place. Then we would eventually find ourselves back on the paved roads, where I intended to kill whoever walked inside. Spare me your judgment. You know what desperation does to the brain. Imagine the most desperate moment of your life. Even if you've been to war, I bet your children weren't at your side. I bet your partner wasn't dragged there against their will, and you almost certainly weren't forced to barter with your literal soul, were you? If so, I'd love to chat, but it's not a contest. Trauma is trauma, and we all react to it differently. If you guys know one thing about me, it's that I'm always wrong. We had found our way into a grass trail station, and I spent each day terrified that we would suddenly find ourselves back in that hellish landscape, or that the infamous Cyrus would suddenly appear. But we actually had a great week compared to what we were used to. Of course, we were still forced to endure Olivia's special announcements. They came on 3 times a day, every day. That's how it worked the other time I stayed in the station, but it was always so random in the tunnels because of the time changes. We were terrified the first time we heard one. Olivia strongly indicated that the hangar doors wouldn't protect us against Cyrus, but no one ever came. We eventually learned to ignore the threats altogether. You can only be told the boogeyman is coming to get you so many times before you stop believing it. Doug said the demon who ruled this place moved on to another game. I was beginning to think Olivia was just bored and missed her master. Yeah, that wasn't it. Sorry. Anyway, we didn't actually make it to the Backroads until our 5th try. Every Saturday night, we stripped naked, put our possessions in a pile, and allowed ourselves to be scanned by the cleaners before quickly disappearing into the tunnels. The 2nd and 3rd attempts landed us at a dirt road station, and the 4th attempt was the only one to finally land us in a paved street station. Water and soup were never so delicious. In all that time, never once were we taken up to the Backroads. We were devastated, so devastated that we almost took a deadly risk. We wanted to stay for another week. The cleaners came in as usual, but the one who approached me did so with both hands out, palms up. It was one of those imposters that Doug told me about. While scanning me with his Geiger counter thing, a small, crumpled piece of paper fell from his hand, and I quickly secured it with my foot, only bending to retrieve it once he turned away. I knew we were safe as long as we played along, but it never gets easier. Neither does facing the tunnels, though we had initially hoped that would no longer be necessary. Now that we'd found a paved streets exit, we didn't want to lose it. But that note changed everything. I read it the moment we left the hangar. It said "danger" in all caps, followed by "a demon is coming." At the bottom were directions to a room further down the tunnel and instructions detailing how to spot and open a door. It also said, "friends are waiting." I remember Doug essentially vouching for the fake cleaners, but my trust issues have multiplied exponentially since my first days in the tunnels. Even so, I felt that if he were genuinely trying to help, it was only because he had no way of knowing we weren't new to the game. He would have assumed we were fresh from the roads and probably still in shock. "A demon is coming" was a fine way to ensure a fast reaction with minimal questioning, especially for anyone who's seen the Stranded. I just didn't see any reason to meet with him when we already had a perfectly fine plan in place. We were going to hide around the corner and sneak back in just like any other Sunday, but Paula had one of her feelings. She said coming right back would be too easy, and that the tunnels didn't do easy. She was right again. I should have seen it coming too. Either way, we dodged a bullet. We agreed to hear the man out, but we were keeping the escape plan to ourselves. No matter how well-intentioned he may be, we didn't know him. We couldn't risk tying ourselves to a stranger. Proceeding down the tunnel, we counted 6 doors on the left and entered the 7th. A short, round woman with gray hair was startled by our appearance, but she ushered us inside without hesitation, a look of pity playing on her face as she noticed the kids. New clothes were given to us, and we were allowed to dress before joining the group further in. 5 others were spread around a run-down disco club. 4 men and 1 woman, all sharing the same sorrowful stare. A short, hairy man came to stand just behind the old lady. They could have been siblings for their similarities, but the way they looked at one another said it was more. We later learned their names were Mike and Marion. But there was no time to chat until we were relocated to their backup meeting place, the living room of an abandoned crack den by the looks and smell of it. Once there, Mike explained the rules of the tunnel while we waited for the rest of our group to arrive. I didn't expect to learn anything new. I was just aggravated about wasting time. But there's more to those Geiger counter ones than we realized. They scan for organic material, and when found, the inorganic materials, such as clothes, are separated. The machines transmit results to the main office in real time. That means any demons that are still roaming around would have been alerted to our presence. The map. Paula never missed a beat. No one ever suspected this wasn't our first time.
Demons? You mean those sickly, starved people we saw in the woods? They attacked us the first night we were lost. But they fled as soon as we fought back. What do they want with us?
Those were the Stranded. Don't worry about them. You won't see any down here. I mean, actual demons like what you see in the horror movies. We don't have time to give you the full story, but more likely than not, there is one looking for you as we speak. It's okay, they won't find you now, and you'll learn the ropes fast once we start moving in earnest. We've worked out a foolproof system. Haven't lost a life in over a year.
But what do they want? What happens if they do catch us? What do you mean, system?
It's best not to discuss the nitty-gritty in front of the young'uns. I know this is a lot to take in, but there are rules to living down here. A system. And if you follow the rules, you can stay alive. There's power in numbers. We take turns making hub runs, and everyone pulls their weight with the chores. There's other kids in our group too. You'll meet them when we get back to base. I'm sure our guys will be here any minute. If not, we'll have to leave without them.
That sounds like a fine way of living. And we thank you for the orientation. But we just want to go home. Maybe if...
Everyone froze at the horrific sounds coming from the tunnels, but the instant all fell silent, everything happened very fast. Mike's group began to move towards the rear exit as he scooped Chloe into his arms and rushed to take the lead, while the rest closed in around him, effectively blocking us from our daughter. They countered our protest by insisting we follow along. They showed no hesitation in leaving the rest of their party for dead. It didn't inspire much faith in their perfect system. We followed them through half a dozen tunnels and rooms before Paula turned to shoot me a look that demanded action. She was thinking the same as myself, that if they got us back to their base, there was no telling how long it would take to escape. Even if we lived long enough to try, my own humanity is further gone than I thought. I didn't hesitate. Now that the shock of hearing those men die had started to fade, I was free to feel the full fury of what these people were trying to do. They knew we didn't want to go with them, but they couldn't accept that, so they snatched our kid. Well, everything that happened from that point was their fault, not mine. You see that? I didn't have a choice, right? I know you understand. You've been with me from the beginning. You're the only ones I can really count on now. It's just, well, you spend enough time thinking about anything, and it's liable to get under your skin, right? The younger female was trailing at the end of the pack, and before I knew it, I had a fistful of that poor girl's hair, dragging her backwards. Her scream echoed through the corridor, drowning Paula's surprised gasp as I positioned myself to break the woman's neck with one easy twist if they didn't release Chloe. The desperation in Mike's voice, I've heard it in my own. Wonder how young she actually was.
Wait, you don't understand what's happening. I swear, we're only trying to help. You can't possibly understand the danger we're in. We haven't gone far enough. All that screaming, it knows exactly where we are now. Oh no. Do you smell that? It's almost here. You want to kill your family? Fine.
The relief I felt at the sight of Chloe running safely back to Paula's arms was cut short before I could release my hostage. A door directly between us and Mike's group opened to reveal the worst nightmare stepping into the dim tunnel light. My actions were completely automatic. It was as if someone else was controlling my body, and I was simply viewing the events as a third party. So many things happened at once. I was semi-aware of the screaming taking place behind the demon. With all that commotion, you'd think it would have focused its attention in their direction, but it seemed to only have eyes for us. It was able to imitate humans better than the deranged feral ones you usually see in the tunnels, like the one who bought my soul, only, I don't know. I don't want to say I could feel his aura, more like this demon was so evil that it seeped out of his body in the form of heat waves. You could physically see it. The dim lighting masked parts of his face in shadow, but what I could see appeared to have no skin. He was completely red and charred, as if all the skin had been burned away. There was no hair. His eyes were just glowing, red-hot coals, and his peeled-back lips revealed thin, needle-point fangs. From the shoulders down, he was covered with a brown, tattered robe. Just glancing into those eyes made me feel as if I would spontaneously erupt into flames. I was soaked in sweat as instinct took full, merciless, and unapologetic control of my body, and I shoved that poor girl straight into the monster before turning to follow my already fleeing family through the closest door. The symphony of screams that echoed behind us reached new, unimaginable heights. I didn't dare look back, but the sound that haunts me seemed very much like that of a skull being crushed. When I dream, I see that thing's hands on either side of a girl's head. I don't even know her name, just the sounds of her screams being abruptly silenced as those giant hands began to squeeze, followed by that god-awful crunch. Then came the sounds of her family, screams of terror, of anguish, the gunshots. Paula led us away. She wasn't using the map. We lost any chance of getting into the station that day. We just wanted to gain as much distance as possible, so we didn't stop until several hours later. It was another Planet Fitness. Have I told you how many of those we find? It's insane. Well, anyway, that was probably the hardest week we ever had in the tunnels. We had no hub supplies, just the clothes on our backs and whatever resources we came across. I risked more than one honey trap to keep us going. They usually had some kind of snacks and water, but it was all worth it, because at the end of the next week, we found our way inside the 5th and final station hangar. We spent 4 nights in the hangar before being suddenly blinded by sunlight pouring in through the windows. We were topside. We all cried silent tears of joy, but it was too early to celebrate. Knowing what had to come next, Paula took the kids behind the counter while I crept toward the entrance. One look outside, and I knew all of our plans were worthless. Parked at the pump was an old blue van with handicap tags. I could hear Olivia's voice playing through the speakers, but neither of the newcomers seemed to be paying attention. I called Paula over as the van's lift lowered the man onto the ground, and she saw the problem immediately. We couldn't very well kill them and take their van, could we? Was it really so different than if it had been another family? Or another Rob? Well, I'm genuinely asking. I can't tell right from wrong anymore. Considering I don't have a soul, I don't think it matters anyway. What's the point if I'm just some demon's property? At least Paula knows who she belongs to. I gotta stop obsessing over that. In the end, we decided to make nice with the newcomers. Mr. Sanders was 83, barely lucid, and had all but 6 months to live, while his nurse, Jeremy, was a single father with 2 kids. It took some doing to convince him what this place was. He was transporting Mr. Sanders to an end-of-life care facility when they got a little turned around, as he put it. He hadn't been on the road long enough to suspect anything was wrong, and he definitely thought we were crazy. But when he couldn't call the police, his office, or his kids, he became a little more receptive to our story. Not by much. In the end, we still had to take the old man hostage to keep him in one place. It reminded me of how Mike took off with Chloe. The kids helped put Jeremy at ease, but believe it or not, it was Olivia's announcement that finally convinced him he wasn't in Kansas anymore. There were no wires running to those old speakers. They shouldn't have worked, and Olivia shouldn't have known our names.
Well, hello again, station squatters. We would like to give a special shout out to the Palmer family, the first ones to ever return from the maintenance tunnels. Of course, no one has ever been willing to make the sacrifices they have either. Just think. Mike and his little crusaders had been stealing our cleaner recruits for nearly a decade. But not anymore. You threw the leader's daughter into our master's arms. And now, a civil war has broken out amongst the rest.
We all stared at the speakers in shocked silence, absorbing those words. We'll never be sure if Mike and Marion were truly good people, or if Olivia's message was simply more mind games. But a feeling in the pit of my stomach tells me she didn't have to fake that one. It's the way he dropped Chloe so quickly, as if it truly had been for no one's benefit but our own. The second it put his own people in danger, he didn't care what we did. That's the problem with life in the tunnels. You don't have the luxury of asking questions first. Those have to come later. I hope our fear of repeating that mistake hasn't caused us to make an even bigger one by allowing the old man and his nurse to live. But if worse comes to worse, they won't exactly be hard to handle, especially if we take care of Jeremy first. That's just how we have to think now. Now that Jeremy believes us, he was kind enough to lend me his phone. I have to believe this message will reach you as the others have. I wish I was leaving off with something a little more hopeful in the way of getting home, but the most important thing is that we're out of those damn tunnels. No matter what, we're never going back there again. I'd rather die than suffer through one more hub run. Besides, there's always the chance of help from the outside, right? And hey, I don't want any of you to even think about trying to come here. But if you happen to have police or military connections, now they might be able to rig something up, you know? Maybe they could bring a few tanks and drones down here, a few missile launchers for those monsters in the grass trails. You never know what'll happen if you can survive long enough, and surviving on the paved roads is a walk in the park once you've endured the maintenance tunnels. I'll try not to keep asking you guys. Well, until then, wish me luck. It's finally over. I'm going to finish this account of my time in the Backroads, and it'll be the last you'll ever hear from me. Figuring out where to start is the worst part about writing this. The need to include every minuscule detail is always at war with a desperate urge to get it over with. These aren't fun memories to relive. I want the world to know the injustices we've suffered. I want revenge, but I also want to just lay down and die. I became lost in the Backroads on June 16th, 2022, and it was August 11th when I mistakenly dragged my family to hell. After that, I can't be sure. But now, it's the summer of 2026. From your perspective, that's 4 years start to finish. But from our perspective, it was actually a bit longer. Those announcements from Olivia were the only way we could even try to keep track of the actual time. Sometimes, even though the announcement had just played, we would arrive in a news section to hear it was already tomorrow. Or, what happened most often, we would travel through multiple sections without hearing a thing. We would feel the need to eat and sleep multiple times a day before finally hearing that no more than a day had passed. Like Delphi said, time just worked differently depending on where you were. We finally made it out of the tunnels. Paula and I looked 10, 15 years older, but stress tends to age you faster than time. Milo was a full-blown teenager, and Chloe was at least 12, maybe 13. Obviously, we were all grateful to be on a regular clock again. Now that we had the means of transportation, it was time to face the most important decision of all. Do we resign ourselves to life on the paved streets, or try to find our way home through the grass trails? I told the others everything about my first time navigating the roads. And I do mean everything. I admitted to killing Rob over this very argument, only to change my mind in the end. And I didn't hold back when describing the monsters in each stage. The map Delphi gave us didn't work above ground, so we were also back to flying blind. Of course, Paul and the kids had no trouble accepting my claims as factual. After years of dodging demons in the tunnels, life on the roads sounded fairly simple. Jeremy, on the other hand, was more difficult to convince. He couldn't imagine facing a horde of stranded any more than I could have on my first night. But seeing is believing, so we loaded up and went for a drive. When we first hit the road with Jeremy and Mr. Sanders, I had my doubts, lots of them, but couldn't ignore how useful it would be to have a nurse with us. Plus, Jeremy had kids of his own. He knew how important it was to protect Chloe and Milo first. Even though we weren't leaving the paved streets, we still kept gas well under a quarter tank. Keeping the fuel low meant that a station would never be too far away, and we were fortunate when it came to vehicles. The van had more than enough space for 6 people. I couldn't help from wondering how long Mr. Sanders would be with us. I was so focused on playing through scenarios that I didn't hear Paula or Jeremy's questions until Chloe gave me a nudge.
Hello? Are you even listening? You know I've never been here, right?
Paula sat in the front passenger seat while I sat between the kids in the back, and she had clearly been trying to get my attention for a good minute. Shaking off the last of my stupor, I kneeled down between the front seats to better see the road. Sorry, I was just thinking. Besides, it doesn't matter which way we go. It's all the same in any direction. We're just driving straight until we find a dirt road. But, Jeremy, do not drive on the dirt road. You must park on the paved streets, or we could die. I left no room for confusion. I would have preferred to do the driving myself, but Jeremy was still learning to trust us, and forcing the issue would only cause further delays.
And how long does it take to find some of these strangers?
He asked before Paula could make another snappy remark. Stranded, I automatically corrected. They aren't fans of the light, so they usually remain hidden until dark. Other players tend to hang out near transition points, the places where the paved streets turn into the dirt roads. Because the stations are so much nicer in Stage 2, so that's where the stranded like to hunt. No one had anything to add. The only sounds to break the uncomfortable silence were those of the rumbling van, combined with Mr. Sanders' haggard breathing. It was wearing on all of our nerves, but Jeremy was the first to seek relief. Reaching forward, he began searching through radio stations, but with every turn of the knob, there was only more static. "You won't find anything out here." I was just trying to save him the headache, but it's true what they say about fresh perspectives. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Then, what were they playing in the gas station?
They just play those weird instrumentals and broadcast in the stations and the tunnels, but not in the cars. I saw my mistake as soon as the words left my mouth.
Maybe it's AM.
I thought back, trying to remember if I actually checked the AM stations, but I couldn't be sure. Then, just as Jeremy's shoulders slumped in disappointment, he bounced back with a cheerful,
Damn.
as clear, crisp instrumentals just like in the stations poured from the speakers. Don't misunderstand, it's not like this was a groundbreaking revelation that would somehow lead to our freedom. It was just nice to not ride in silence anymore. Jeremy didn't have so much as a downloaded podcast on his phone. We had several hours of driving before the sky finally started to dim. On and on we went with no sign of another person or place, just miles of identical highways surrounded by an unchanging forest landscape. With the night came the darker music I dubbed as Satan's Orchestra. The music used to unnerve my family the same way it had originally unnerved me, but we were long since accustomed to the melodramatic symphony. Jeremy, however, was not.
Does anyone mind if we take a break from the music? Something about that tune is just so unsettling.
It tends to have that effect, but the music is one of the things you actually will get used to. It's the rest of it that haunts you.
Paula said, craning her neck as she scanned the tree lines for any sign of movement. Finally, we made it. Jeremy turned the van around and came to a stop 20 feet from where the dirt road began.
Okay, you know what? I don't think this is necessary. I drove in a straight line for an entire day, and the scenery never changed. Plus, I have no doubts the monsters exist. Maybe we should just go back to a station.
He began shifting into drive, but I urged him to wait. "Just turn the lights off for a moment and let the engine die. This is important." His hand shook as he turned off the lights, but there were several relief sighs when the stars proved bright enough to distinguish the shapes within the darkness. Even so, we heard them before we saw them. It took over an hour and started as a pair of footsteps in the brush. Just one set, drawing closer until it emerged onto the open road. We ducked down, hoping our heads would remain unnoticed through the tinted windows as additional figures lumbered into the street and stopped about 10 feet ahead of us. Jeremy started to scream, but Paula placed a hand over his mouth. We had seen more than enough, and now it was time to go. But Jeremy was frozen in fear as one of the stranded raised its hand and began to wave at additional shadows still looming in the forest. Suddenly, multiple figures began closing in from every direction.
Move him!
Paula was ready to take the wheel, and I didn't have time to be gentle. Sitting up, I hooked my arms beneath Jeremy's and pulled until we spilled into the back. The lights came on, and our attention was drawn to the inhuman figures as they retreated. Their thin, frail frames made them appear weak and harmless, but that's part of what made them so deadly. They may not possess much in the way of individual strength, but they move with predatory speed and rip apart their prey like a horde of zombies. Paula didn't hesitate to plow through the pale, emaciated figure directly before us. A thick spray of blood splattered across the windshield, just before our tires crushed its bones and threw us around like a bounce house. The other stranded fled back into the forest, but we didn't stop until safely within the next station's borders. That's another problem with trusting a stranger on the backroads. You have no clue how to gauge what they can handle. I wanted to force a confrontation with the stranded in a semi-controlled environment so I would know what to expect. If that had happened in a true life or death scenario, we would all likely be dead.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. I wanted to move. I just couldn't.
Tears spilled down Jeremy's cheeks as he came to terms with the harsh reality all Backroads participants must face. Forget it. You can't let that stuff eat away at you. Now that you've seen them, you know what to expect. He continued staring straight ahead, and I followed his gaze to Mr. Sanders wheezing into his oxygen mask.
You won't last a day once that last tank is empty.
One thing at a time. For now, you should get some rest. This stuff isn't something you can process overnight. We can discuss options for Mr. Sanders first thing. And with that, I left him to it. Paula was already settling down with the kids, which meant I was taking the first watch. It was hot and cramped in the little station, so I went out for some fresh air. When I realized how late it was getting, I went back inside to hear a strained gurgling and rushed towards the source. Jeremy stood, smothering Mr. Sanders with his pillow. The oxygen mask lay discarded nearby. The old man's arms struggled to reach the pillow, but he couldn't lift them high enough. Instead, he made sad, flapping motions, each one weaker than the last. I took one step forward and stopped, then quietly went back outside. I'm sure it sounds awful, maybe downright evil, when you hear that from the safety of your own home, but that's how things have to be done on the Backroads. When I came back 20 minutes later, Jeremy was crying in the office cubby. I thought things would get easier after the old man was gone, but now I see his death for what it was, an omen. We threw his body unceremoniously into the forest and ripped out the van's lift like Mr. Sanders never existed. Not a single word was spoken on the matter, but Jeremy couldn't meet our eyes after that.
And you're positive there's no way of surviving the trails?
We had settled into a new station, and thoughts of escape consumed his every waking moment. Thoughts of his children constantly chipped away at him. Did they go to his alcoholic ex or to their loving grandmother? There was no way to know. I don't see how anyone could get through there. We need the National Guard or SWAT teams or something. Those monsters roam free day and night.
I see. Well, you all clearly have a better understanding of this world than myself. Though I disagree, I can admit my opinion is largely biased. My family thinks I'm dead. I haven't broken my routine in almost 9 years, but now I've fallen off the face of the fucking planet with a patient. That's what people cinch said. Foul play all day. At least they'll know I didn't leave by choice.
I'm sorry. I understand your pain. I do. But take consolation in knowing that it could have been worse. They could be here. With us.
Paula obviously sympathized on a deep personal level.
Wait a second. Maybe we should talk about this a little more. There has to be a way to win, right? Or it defeats the purpose. Didn't you say there was some game master demon waiting to make a deal at the end?
Jeremy firmly believed talking about it enough would eventually lead to a revelation. I can't believe he was right. There wasn't much else to do anyway, but this particular conversation took place on a Saturday. We were all extra stressed about being forced back onto the road, but we did our best to remain civil and productive. Not anymore. The game is no longer active. That's the other problem. What if we actually do find an exit and there's no way to open it? Or worse, what if there is a gatekeeper? What do we have left to trade? Your soul?
Okay, I see your point, but bear with me. Obviously, they don't pass out Robux down here, so how do we know this information is accurate? And if the game was decommissioned, who is Cyrus? If the lady on the radio knows your names, that means it's a live broadcast, right? It can't be old recordings. Someone is here.
His questions got me thinking. I'm not sure how Doug got his information. I was so lost and alone when we met, I would have believed anything. As for Cyrus, I spent plenty of time wondering about him. The demons we normally saw were savage, mindless beings, but the one who stole my soul was something more evolved. It possessed a level of intellect and self-control. Cyrus, however, is something even more evolved still. In his presence, the very air becomes like a weighted blanket. You can feel it wash over your skin. If he's not the game master, then I would hate to see who is.
And if Cyrus is so powerful, if he's always watching, why doesn't he just come and kill you? Get it over with.
Because it's a game, I guess. Maybe it would be against the rules. Or maybe he just enjoys tormenting us. Hell, it's probably both.
Sweet Jesus, why couldn't there just be a rulebook? Games are supposed to come with rulebooks.
Jeremy rubbed his temples in frustration while I attempted to return to my Sunday prep work.
You're right. That's exactly what we should have.
I hadn't even realized Paula was listening, but now she was a woman on a mission.
Have you ever looked through all the extra junk under the counter?
She was rummaging through the shelves, knocking several miscellaneous items to the floor. Well, no, not really. I followed her to the small office where her search continued. Why? What are you looking for?
These stations all have the same name, like a chain. All chain stores have handbooks. Oh, look!
She stood with a small stack of binders.
Finances, zoning, staff. Aha! Oh my god! I was right! Jeremy, quick, come here!
I couldn't believe it. I rushed over to the desk where Paula was opening the slim black binder labeled Rules and Regulations. It had been right under our noses all along, and any doubts about the game being decommissioned were put to rest once and for all. Our copy was a third edition, printed in July 1988, but listed the original publication date as October 1948. I still can't help but think what navigating the original Backroads must have been like. Imagine surviving the war only to end up there. I wish I could show you the manual in its entirety, but I'll have to give you the broad strokes. Originally, players were meant to progress through the first stage rather quickly. The paved streets are essentially a lobby, a transition area to let you know you've made it. Then, they were supposed to overcome the dirt roads and grass trails dangers until they found the Game Master. There was also a brief description of his appearance, which matched Cyrus perfectly. That's one face I'll never forget. Another interesting difference in the original setup is that during their travels, players would face obstacles such as direwolves, minotaurs, basilisks, and other mythical creatures, not the stranded or those rabid, mutated monsters. Those came later, after all the others had moved on. The stations were closed on Sunday, both for maintenance and to ensure no one simply decided to stay indefinitely. The section regarding the tunnels was particularly interesting. Players were never meant to see them. In fact, Olivia's announcements were specifically to ensure no one would be inside when the stations vanished. It reminded me of a magic show. The audience isn't meant to see the wires and mirrors. Obviously, mistakes happen, and that's why the cleaners are programmed to convert any players who don't make it through. But it was never expected to be on a large scale, and it certainly wasn't meant for people to live down there. Even more surprising is that the maintenance tunnels aren't solely used for the Backroads. They're used for all of the demon games in existence. We could have possibly ended up in a completely different game. Since there was no rhyme or reason to ending up on the Backroads, most of the players arrived by accident with no desire or intention of selling their soul. Without the clues, these accidental players were left to wander aimlessly with no way of knowing where they were or how to escape. More and more were eventually left stranded without their vehicles and forced into the forest. From there, it would have been only a matter of time before the land's limited resources were depleted. The stranded acted as an invasive species, and their population grew. But why did they turn into mindless zombie-like creatures instead of simply dying? How did they eventually evolve into the monstrosities we witnessed in stages 2 and 3? Your guess is as good as mine. We're talking about a world where gas stations appear out of thin air and demons barter souls like it's a flea market. How does any of it work? We read every word of that handbook multiple times, but the section to which we kept returning was when it described finding the Game Master. The exact phrasing was, upon signing their contracts, players will be allowed to pass through exit. Obviously, we always believed the exit was in the grass trails, but trying to locate it before one of those monsters killed us was a suicide mission. Having the directions gave us better odds. It was something. From what I remembered, the dirt roads were much longer than the paved streets, and we had to assume the same would be true for the grass trails. We had to make every second count if there was any hope of making it to the last station before Sunday. Jeremy took the first shift driving, and we made it 3 hours down the dirt road before nightfall forced us to stop. I did my best to prepare the others for the monsters we would see, but they couldn't imagine them any more than you can now. You've all formed these images in your mind based on my description, but none of you are even close to picturing the real thing. You can't be. They're a collection of twisted, mangled forms molded together like Play-Doh. One of them stood outside of the station all night, just staring, as if mentally willing us to cross the threshold. It had to be 10 feet tall. Its chest had tumorous lumps growing around a basketball-sized black hollow hole in the center. One of its eyes was stark white, while the second was either black or missing. Next to its mouth was something red that could have been another eye or some kind of wound. It may have been 3 arms, or it may have been a third leg growing out of its torso. The shape, the way it moved, seemed wrong for an arm, but everything about it seemed wrong, so who knows? Milo and Paula ignored it and made their beds in the far corner. Jeremy watched it for a short time before making his own bed on the other side of the station. I'm not sure how long I stood in the window, staring back at it, but when I finally turned away, I saw Chloe had been watching next to me. The way she looked at it was disturbing. It wasn't with fear or disgust. It was more like fascination or intrigue. I told her to go to sleep, but so intent was her focus upon the monster that she didn't even hear me. I had to physically take her hand and guide her away from the window. She left without a word, but for the first time, she gave me the same look I knew so well from her mother, hatred with a side of contempt. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Instead, I woke the others just before dawn, and we left at first light. We drove mostly in silence. No one felt much like talking. When your life depends on gas usage, you become an expert at how long it'll last. We got low just as the sun was beginning to set, and pulled into a station for another long night. This time there were 3 of those monstrosities camped outside, all of them just staring at us with hungry eyes, which was especially unsettling from the one who was literally covered in eyes. All different colors, they were like measles all over its face, arms, and torso. Chloe once again stared in quiet fascination until Paula guided her to bed. She gave her mother the same disdainful look I'd received the night before, but Paula either didn't notice or didn't care. Though my sleep was restless, I managed a few hours and was grateful for what I got, especially since it was the last night I would ever spend with my family. I lost them all the following afternoon. Were we on edge about entering the grass trails? Yes, of course we were. But considering what we were used to, our guard was relatively low on the dirt roads. Danger only came out at night, and we still had several days before Sunday left us without a station. Our only real concern was the monsters on the grass trail. The only reason I survived the first time was because a station appeared minutes after crossing over, and then I never left. It wouldn't be that way this time. Anyway, I just want to get this next part over with, so here it goes. That morning, we packed up and got on the road like normal. We were expecting to spend another full day on the dirt roads because it took me 3 days to clear them the first time, but we actually saw grass that afternoon and stopped several yards away to talk it over. According to the handbook, the grass trails had several smaller turnoffs randomly placed throughout the main stretch. We were supposed to keep going straight until one of those turnoffs was marked with a street sign. It sounds simple enough, right? Ideally, we didn't want to run out of gas once we crossed over. The grass trail monsters crowded around stations just like the dirt road monsters. Only they didn't just go away after a certain period of time. If we got surrounded, we were doomed. Not knowing how long it would take to find the street sign, we decided to run down our gas, fill up on the dirt road, and then cross over. One way or another, it was going to be our last tank. So we turned around, drove a couple of miles, turned back around. We did that a few times. Paula was driving, Milo sat shotgun, Jeremy and I sat in the middle seats while Chloe sat in the very back on the floorboards. Everyone lost in their own thoughts. Then we were almost back to the grass when we heard it. It sounded like a jet engine. It was deafening. It happened in a flash. The Hummer made impact before I had time to understand it was speeding towards us. It must have been going over 80 miles an hour at least. This giant hulking thing. We were hit head on. Even if Paula had reacted instantly, there was nothing she could have done. I'm not sure how well I can convey the next part. It was all fast but slow, clear yet incoherent. When I think back, everything is a jumble of flashes and out of order. Sometimes small details change, so I'm just going to do the best I can. I think I lost consciousness, but only for a moment. Jeremy was screaming. Not words, just plain, blood-curdling screams. My shoulder was dislocated. That's not a feeling you mistake. When it happens, you know. My vision was blurry from blood running down into my eyes. Everything hurt, but I could move. I'm not sure how other people react to an accident like that. On TV, you see people open their eyes and immediately begin screaming for their family, checking on each other. But for a second, it was like I forgot where I was or who I was with. There was a ringing in my head, and Jeremy's screams. God, I've never heard screams like that. Everything was in slow motion once I wiped the blood from my eyes. I was sitting behind Paula, but the first thing I saw wasn't the back of her seat. It was just twisted, metallic nonsense. I couldn't tell what I was looking at, really. The front of the van just wasn't there. For a split second, I acknowledged Paula's death with little emotion, because she was obviously dead. There was no doubt. Then it hit me. My kids were in the van. Milo was next to Paula. I looked where the passenger seat used to be, but it was just more twisted, gnarled metal. If there was anything human, any morality or decency left in me, it died in that moment. I felt part of myself actually fade away with the realization that my son was gone. But Chloe, what about Chloe? I turned to the back. The windows were shattered. The rear doors were gone. There was no sign of my baby girl. Suddenly, my pain vanished. I felt nothing but a desperate need to get out of that van. My door wouldn't open, so I threw myself over the seat and out of the rear doors. Still no sign of Chloe. I screamed her name. I looked under the van, in the ditches, nothing. I made my way to the front of the van and took in the full terror of what had happened. This Hummer was outfitted like something from a zombie apocalypse movie. It looked like they used the metal from the station roof to make a ram on the front. There was more attached to the sides and the back. They must have thought it would protect them on the grass trails. Under normal circumstances, I would have been jealous we didn't think of it ourselves. There were 2 men inside, or used to be. The driver was halfway through the windshield, dead. The passenger was lying in the road, moaning. It's like I was possessed. I didn't consciously choose to go to him. My body just moved. Suddenly, I was sitting on top of him. My bad arm was hanging limply to the side, while my other arm punched him in the face just over and over and over. The guy on the pavement never said a word. He didn't try to stop me. He just went limp. Flesh began peeling away from bone. Blood sprayed the dirt. My vision went blurry again, this time with a mixture of blood and tears. I was crying, but I didn't feel it. I only felt rage. Eventually, the adrenaline began to fade. I couldn't swing anymore. I fell forward and rolled off the man's body. For what felt like several minutes, I stared at the sky, unable to move. Jeremy's voice brought me back to reality. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was calling my name, begging for help. All that time, it never occurred to me to check on him. His foot was crushed beneath the passenger seat rubble. I found a metal bar to use as leverage. We managed to pull it free, but he was in bad shape. A lot of skin got left behind. Still, he managed to pop my shoulder back into its socket, and we used his shirt to wrap his foot as best we could.
Did you get Chloe back? What happened? Who took her? Where's Paula and Milo?
He was in deep shock. He couldn't see what was right in front of him. Ignorance is a special kind of bliss, but once you lose it, it's gone forever. Chloe was my immediate concern, and what I chose to address. Did you see her? Jeremy, did you see Chloe? Think.
No, I didn't see her, but you were screaming at someone to give her back. I never heard anyone else, though. Just you. What happened? Paula, Milo, where are you? Oh my God, Jesse, the van, they were...
I didn't remember saying any of that, but again, it's not important. I know, okay, I know. They're gone, but we have to find Chloe. Focus! You didn't see her at all? Jeremy glanced to the empty place where Chloe had been seated.
Maybe, did she... Do you think she wandered into the station?
Station? I glanced around. What station? There's no station here.
Yeah, it's right.
He looked behind me, pointing at the trees, and stopped short.
It was there. I swear the station was right there. I saw it.
I didn't know what to think, if I could trust him in his current condition. I'm sure he believed he saw it, but even if it was real, even if she went inside, it couldn't disappear while she was in there. It's the middle of the week. We searched for her up and down the road, in the woods, screamed her name, begged her to magically appear, but nothing. By some scrap of good fortune, the Hummer still worked. All that jerry-rigged armor did its job. But we had to pry most of it off the bumper to get free of the van. What it uncovered, though, Paula and Milo's remains, what was left of them. I'm not going there. You can imagine it. There was just under half a tank of gas. We continued to call for Chloe as we circled the area. When a station finally did appear, it was empty. I knew it would be. Jeremy stayed inside while I continued searching. It was hard for him to move around with his mangled foot, even with the crappy crutch we fashioned out of the loose wreckage. What we really needed was Mr. Sanders' wheelchair, but it was long gone. At least with Paula and Milo, I had closure. I knew they were gone. Chloe, what options did I have? We were on a dirt road. I had to go inside when it got dark. Even if she survived the crash, she didn't stand a chance with those monsters. Logically, we had to conclude she was dead, one way or the other. Olivia's broadcast was especially brutal that night. She didn't bother with a clever opening. There were no cute nicknames, just a ghostly taunting.
Chloe! Chloe! Where are you, Chloe? Daddy's looking for you, Chloe!
I smashed the speaker to pieces and received 3 serenely silent seconds before her maniacal laughter filled the station in surround sound. When it finally ended, the Satan's orchestra returned to serenade us for the rest of the night. We didn't talk. There was nothing else to say, but we both cried. While my tears were silent, Jeremy's were gut-wrenching, full-bodied sobs. I can't blame him. I'd spent years knowing this day was inevitable. It was almost poetic that it happened so close to the end. One tragic irony to haunt me for the rest of my days. Honestly, I'm not even sure how to describe my feelings towards Paula. She hated me in the end, but it wasn't without cause. I deserved everything she threw at me. Still, I grew to resent her, to think of her as 2 different people, the Paula before and the Paula after. I loved one, hated the other. I can't justify it, and I can't really care if it's wrong. It's just how I feel. The kids, though, there were no words. That's a wound that time will never heal. I almost gave up right there, walked right out of the door and into the wailing monster's arms. But then I thought of Jeremy. I could lie and say I stayed because he's a good guy who deserved to go home, deserved to see his family again, because he is, and he does, but that wasn't my deciding factor. I wanted to spite the Backroads, to beat it, to beat Cyrus and Olivia. Getting him out before they could break him seemed like the best way to do that. Sure, he thought he was already broken, but he didn't understand how bad things could really get. No, there was still time for him. In the morning, we took the Hummer and entered the grass trails.
We're gonna die here, aren't we?
Nope, screw this place. We're going home.
Okay then. I believe you, brother.
First things first, these crazy little bitches are gonna start attacking us any minute. I need you to keep your eyes out for the street sign, no matter what. I'm gonna focus on keeping us mobile, and you're gonna focus on the exit. Got it?
Got it.
My first time on the trails was short, maybe 20 minutes. I didn't know if finding that turnoff was gonna take hours or days, but I had a fire lit under me, so failure wasn't an option. My eyes darted from side to side, waiting for the first monster to appear. Jeremy saw her first.
Dude, is that a woman? She's gonna die out here. We can't just leave her.
Poor, sweet, naive Jeremy. He wouldn't have made it past day 1 on his own. There was a woman, all right. She was beautiful, like she could have been on the cover of a Sports Illustrated. I punched the gas and drove straight into her. She was thrown onto the windshield and over the passenger side. Jeremy screamed. I ignored him and kept going.
Why? You didn't have to.
She was smiling, Jeremy. Think it through. Now keep your eyes peeled for the turnoffs. I don't know if he understood or just didn't want to argue, but that was the end of it. A few minutes later, we faced something worse. One second, the trail was clear. The next, a giant purple millipede shot out of the grass and raised itself at least 8 feet tall, standing on its backside. I barely swerved in time, and it still swung its head around and slammed into the Hummer's rear. The back tires lost contact with the ground, but I managed to keep control of the vehicle. It tried to chase us, but thankfully it was too slow. Jeremy screamed again. Such a drama queen, that one. Paula never screamed. My kids didn't scream. But this man would have screamed at a spider. We made it almost 5 miles before the next hurdle. I saw the treetops bending ahead of us before I saw the actual monster. Please don't scream, I warned Jeremy before he could make a sound. As it grew closer, the ground began to shake, and we could hear the smaller trees snapping beneath its weight. Then it was on the road. The monster I saw on my first visit, 3 times the size of what lived on the dirt roads and twice as ugly. Its skin was stretched to its limit and torn in several places, leaving exposed sections of the muscles beneath. Our only chance was to drive between its legs and pray it was as slow as the millipede. It roared at us as we came, and my insides vibrated with the sound. To his credit, Jeremy didn't scream, but I did. Not out of fear, but anger and determination. I refused to die. As we passed beneath the monster, it brought a giant hand down and struck the Hummer's roof. Somehow we escaped, with only the middle portion dented inward and a few cracked windows. When I looked back, the monster wasn't chasing us. It was laughing. I swear to God, it was laughing. That's when I realized these things aren't trying to kill us. They're playing with us. I told Jeremy my theory, but he didn't respond. When I looked over, he was deathly pale and shaking, his fingers clenched into his thighs like he was trying to grab the bones. It was an improvement to his previous reactions, so I gave him a minute and tried again.
That's a weird definition of playing, but yeah, I think you're right. That thing could have flattened us like a pancake.
Over the next several hours, my assumption was proven correct. We saw monstrous spiders, rabid wolves, crazy skeletons, and even a few robots, and we escaped them all with minimal damage or delay. One of the robots shot lasers from its arm. It could have cut the Hummer in half, but all it did was tear up the ground beneath us. Still, we proceeded cautiously, and the closer it got to nightfall, the more nervous I became. I had a feeling things would work differently in the dark and didn't want to test that theory. Finally, with less than an hour of daylight left, we saw the street sign. It was so overgrown with vines that we nearly missed it.
Oh my God, we found it. We actually found it.
I wasn't ready to celebrate just yet, but I didn't spoil Jeremy's moment. It was a huge accomplishment unto itself. If we hadn't known what to look for, there's absolutely no way we would have noticed the sign or thought twice about it if we had. As we passed by, I noticed the name printed across it, Palmer Lane. A coincidence? In this place? Absolutely not. After only a few minutes, I could already see a station ahead. It didn't need to appear. This one was just there. And impossible to miss. It had a giant flashing neon sign reading Road's End Station. The whole store was huge. We parked and Jeremy started to get out, but I stopped him. We need to talk first about what we might have to do, or more specifically, what you might have to do.
I know that demon won't open the exit unless it gets a soul, and you already traded yours. I'm ready to make a deal.
Are you sure you understand what that means?
Yeah, Paula told me about that soul harvest book. Look, I'm not exactly happy about it, but what choice do I have? I can't stay here forever. I have to go home. I have to get back. Jesse, let's go.
He was gonna say, get back to my family, but didn't want to remind me he still had a family to go back to. That's fine, as long as he knew what was coming. I followed him inside. The lights were bright, the floors were shiny, everything looked brand new. There wasn't a speck of dust in the whole place. As we came into view of the counter, a familiar and infuriating voice welcomed us.
Greetings, Grass Grovers.
That's all I heard. Rage took control, and I charged at Olivia. I don't think I've ever actually described her appearance to you. A Karen to her core. Plump brunette, short curly hair, simple pantsuit that you'd pick up at any mall, and cheap pearls around her neck with matching earrings. I closed the gap in 3 strides and leapt over the counter. I was going to kill her. There was no question in my mind. Then everything went black, and I was suddenly lying on the ground. She hadn't moved.
Oh, sweetie. Did you really think that would work? You're so precious. That's why you're my favorite pet. After decades of boredom, you brought joy back into my life.
Before I could respond, Jeremy hobbled forward to stand between us.
Apologies for my friend. He's had an especially rough go of things lately. You see, we stopped by hoping.
Oh, I know what you were hoping. We can talk about your situation next. But first, Mr. Palmer will be returning to the maintenance tunnels.
There was no way in hell. I was on my feet again, ready to make another attempt at her throat, but Jeremy held me back.
No, ma'am. See, I'm sorry about that. I know you'd like to keep him around, but he wants to go home. We both very much need to go home now.
Actually, Mr. Palmer would like to return to the maintenance tunnels. He just doesn't know it yet.
Her smile stretched impossibly far as she turned to speak directly to me.
Don't worry. You can use our employee elevator in the back. It will allow you to avoid the cleaners and keep your clothes. Consider it my way of saying thanks.
You're one crazy bitch if you think I'm going near those tunnels again. We're done with you. Call your boss and get out of our way.
Be cool, man. I don't think we should piss her off.
Really? Are you sure about that, Mr. Palmer? What if your
Silence, Olivia. You overstep.
It was Cyrus. I didn't see where he came from. He was suddenly just there, standing off to the side, same red, charred skin with hot coal eyes, and the same brown tattered robes. He was even more horrifying in the station's bright lighting. It felt like my eyes would burn from their sockets if I looked at him too long.
Well, someone's in a mood.
Be gone, woman.
Have it your way then. I can tell when I'm not wanted. Good day, gentlemen.
With that, Olivia vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving us alone with Cyrus.
As for you, Jesse Palmer, you have nothing to barter, and therefore no business here. Leave us before my patience expires.
No, wait. I can pay for our passage. I'm ready to make a deal.
Jeremy tried to interject, but his request was quickly denied.
Those are not the rules. One soul equals one ticket. Make your wish and be warned, Jeremy Doyle. You will die where you stand if you test my patience.
Oh, stop it with all that bluster. God, you huff and puff too much.
Ah, for the love of... Not today, Delphi. I just can't with you right now.
I was speechless, stunned. Jeremy's jaw was halfway to his knees. He literally couldn't believe what we were seeing. This horrifying, malevolent embodiment of pure evil was hanging his head and pinching the bridge of his nose as if warding off a headache. I know it's hard to imagine when I said his skin was all red and charred, but I swear he paled at the sight of Delphi.
Oh, believe me, I didn't feel like making the trip. But I'm here on behalf of a friend. I'm personally indifferent about their fate. That one's an idiot.
She pointed at me.
And that one's a crybaby.
She pointed to Jeremy.
But my friend has a vested interest in these two making it home.
Since when do you have friends?
Look, man, I don't pry into what you do with your souls, and I'll thank you to show me the same courtesy. I'm calling in a favor. Let the idiot and the crybaby go home.
I'm willing to let the idiot go. He already sold his soul to Coda, if you can believe it.
Oh, seriously? Coda? Oh man, Palmer, I knew you were an idiot, but Coda? Come on, I've seen crippled children have the sense to turn that loser away.
I had too many things going through my mind to respond. I didn't even care that she was mocking me. I was half grateful for her rescue, and half processing the fact that Paula must be the friend she was referring to. All the things that must mean. Is that why Olivia thought I wanted to return to the tunnels? Did still wanting to go home further confirm what a monster I'd become?
I know, right? I think I'm actually experiencing pity for the first time. No, but seriously though, I would still like to keep the crybaby's soul. I'll cut him a good deal and he can go home, fair and square.
Well, that does sound reasonable to me. My friend is actually pretty fond of the crybaby. And I'm trying to build trust, it's a fairly new relationship.
Ugh, you're killing me, Delphi. I don't think I can do that.
Well, no, actually you can. Because if you refuse, I'll tell Olivia about that night I found you under the Harpy twins.
You wouldn't dare.
Oh, please. Who do you think you're talking to?
I must have imagined 1,000 different ways this final showdown would play out, but none of it came close to whatever this was. It was like seeing behind the scenes of a play, watching the actors drop their persona and become regular people again.
Fine. You win. But that card won't play twice. This makes us even.
Yeah, no problem. You'll need me before I need you.
Delphi started to leave, but I had to ask. I get why Paula would want to help Jeremy, but why me? It was unbelievable. Did part of her still love me after all?
Because death would have been too easy. She wants you to marinate in guilt and regret. Good luck, boys.
Oh, yeah. That checks out. Thanks, send her my love.
You got it.
The tunnel is open. Go before it closes, and pray our paths never cross again.
You didn't have to tell us twice. Jeremy and I almost tripped over each other as we pushed our way outside. I couldn't believe my eyes. A little further down the trail was a tunnel, just like the one that brought me to the Backroads. Jeremy was already in the passenger seat and yelling for me to hurry up. We really were going home. I should have felt joy or relief, but there was only a cold numbness. It was meaningless without my kids. Once we got through the tunnel, we found ourselves next to a mile marker on some random highway in Ohio of all places. It was surreal. We found our way to an actual gas station run by real people. The clerk was nice enough to let Jeremy use the phone, and he was able to contact his family. He cried, of course, but at least they were happy tears for a change. He offered to take me home with him, but I chose to part ways after dropping him at the nearest hospital. He might end up losing that foot. As for me, I had other plans. Can't really go home. What would I say to my parents, to Paula's parents, after we've been missing all these years? Hey, sorry about that. Got trapped in a demon game, dragged my wife and kids to hell. They're all dead, by the way, but I'm home safe and sound, and yeah, what's new with you? Yeah, no thanks. I'm gonna move to a big city, get a new identity, maybe work a night shift at some dive bar, and spend the rest of my days wallowing in regret, just like Paula wanted. My life is essentially over, and my soul is doomed to an eternity of damnation. Anyway, as promised, this is the last you'll hear from me. When Chloe woke up in a ditch, she didn't know what happened. The last thing she remembered was the sound of a loud engine, and then everything went black. Upon climbing the steep rise, she was immediately greeted with the welcome sight of a station and went inside. Then, without warning, the view through the window suddenly changed. The trees were gone. In their place were steel walls. Minutes later, she was slipping past the cleaners and into the tunnels where she slowly walked along, cautiously, but not in fear. She has returned to the familiarity of the only home she recalls. Memories of her life in the real world have long ago faded to a dreamlike quality. Though Chloe has watched her parents navigate the tunnels for years, she now finds herself unable to repeat their actions. She approaches several doors with the intention of pushing her way inside, yet, without her father there, how can she know if a demon is lying in wait? What if it leads to the inside of a volcano and lava comes spilling out on top of her? Or, worst of all, what if other humans are hiding inside? Then, all of these thoughts are rendered moot when one of the metal doors begins to open just a few feet ahead. Chloe doesn't want to see what's coming through. Instead, she throws herself into the opposite wall, suddenly brave enough to launch herself through any other door. Only there is none to be found. As she frantically moves along the wall, the sound of a familiar voice causes her to freeze in place.
Well, hello again, little one. Do you remember me?
Memories of a mushroom wonderland flood back to Chloe as she recalls the witch who bought her mother's soul. Turning slowly, she can't help but stare in stunned silence at the beautiful woman who hasn't aged a day. She can only nod. Regardless of how many years have passed or how hard one tries, Delphi is not someone capable of being forgotten.
Yes, very good. Now, you seem lost. How would you like to come with me? I can take you to see your mother. Oh, although you should know, she looks a little different now. I had to place her soul into a new vessel. She's kind of like Sally, from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Chloe places her hand into the witch's, and they disappear through a new doorway together.
Well, if this doesn't build trust, nothing will. I love the Backroads.
In 2 miles, take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South.
Siri chirped from my sister's phone. Charlotte, turn that off. I know where I'm going.
You sure about that? I mean, it has been a couple of decades, Mark.
Please. Like I could ever forget where Adventure Valley is. Come on, we spent every summer of...
There it is!
I swerved briefly into the oncoming lane as Charlotte thrust her arm in front of my face and pointed excitedly out the window.
There's Adventure Valley! Oh my god, what ride is that? That coaster, it was called Steel something, right? No, wait. That's Mayhem Mountain, isn't it?
I gently pushed my sister's arm out of my face and back over to her seat. I couldn't fault her for her excitement while I was trying so hard to control my own giddiness. It felt like we were kids again, yelling and bouncing in the backseat of my parents' car as the first shining rails and wooden planks of the park's roller coasters came into view above the treetop. "That's the Steel Viper," I told her. "Mayhem Mountain's on the other end of the park, and that wooden coaster over there, that one's Excalibur."
Oh yeah, I remember those. I was always too much of a wuss to ride the Viper, but I rode the shit out of the Excalibur.
"Well, Charlotte, you're an adult now. I think it's time to take on the Viper."
As long as the contractors have tested it and given it the okay, I'm in.
That was really the question, wasn't it? We didn't know which rides had been inspected and cleared and which ones hadn't. I sent up a silent prayer that Mayhem Mountain was counted among the rides that had. I'd left Brandon several voicemails asking about it since he was the one in charge of everything. But with how fast things had been moving since we'd bought the park, I couldn't fault him for being a busy man. If you'd told 12-year-old me that my crazy, hyper, wild-eyed friend Brandon Decker would end up graduating cum laude from Northwestern Business School, I would have laughed in your face. Brandon? No way. Tyler, maybe, but never Brandon. In fact, half the reason I think he chose a business designation was because of Adventure Valley. When the park closed in 1989, Brandon had gathered us all together in his basement, and with a gravitas and solemnness I've never seen in him before, or since, he asked us to make a pact. At the time, the promise had been the most serious vow that 5 12-year-olds could ever make. High off an entire summer of Adventure Sun Valley, we agreed, with all the ceremony of a meeting of Parliament, that we would one day come together and buy Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Of course, back then, we'd planned to just buy it and ride the roller coasters into the ground. We decided which friends from school we would let in and which enemies would be barred from the gates. It had always been our park, and it was only right that we should have it. It had taken 20 years, but we eventually did fulfill our promise, with a hell of a lot of pushing from Brandon and a sizable offering of collateral from Tyler. The bank had agreed to give us the multi-million-dollar loan to buy, repair, refurbish, and reopen the park. The size of the loan that the 6 of us were responsible for gave me nightmares for several weeks. How would this place ever turn a profit? It had been closed decades ago after operating in the red for several years. The county had experienced a high number of runaways and missing persons in the area in the last years of the 1980s. The entire region was on edge as the cases mounted, and people in the area became depressed and suspicious of each other. It had absolutely killed park attendance. But seeing the first cresting waves of roller coaster rails through the trees made me all but forget about my financial worries. This was Adventure Valley, for Christ's sake. If we opened the gates, people would come.
There! That's our exit!
Charlotte squawked. I pulled off the interstate and took a left under the bridge. Less than a mile later, we came upon the acres of the park's parking lot to our right. We turned in and drove all the way up to the front near the gates where several other cars were parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, an old Chevelle, and a Honda Civic, another rental car like ours.
Looks like we're the last ones here,
Charlotte said. She was right. As we pulled up next to the Lexus, I noticed a group of people standing next to the ticket booth, waving to us excitedly.
Oh my god, is that Tyler? Jesus, he's lost some weight. He's so skinny now. And Brandon's losing his hair. Holy shit, is that Koji? Koji got hot.
Calm down, Paris Hilton. These guys are my friends. They're off limits to you. Same rules as when we were teenagers. Besides, half of them are married.
Which half?
I raised an eyebrow at Charlotte and shook my head in amused bewilderment. My little sister never had outgrown her boy craziness.
Wait, who's that?
Charlotte asked as we got out of the car. What? That's Scott. You know Scott.
Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same. The girl next to Scott.
Oh. I had put this off so long that I'd actually forgotten to tell my sister at all. That's Danny, Scott's girlfriend.
Danny? As in Danielle Bircher?
Well, yeah. My sister gave me such a horrid look that you'd think I'd betrayed her to her death, but it was fleeting and quickly replaced by a sly smile.
Fine by me. I'm sure she's not the same person she was in high school. We're all adults now, right? Now come on, let's go.
A sigh of relief escaped my chest as I slammed the car door and followed Charlotte over to the entrance. Though I saw most of these guys every year, seeing us all here together, standing at the ticket booths of Adventure Valley, brought me some sort of happiness I hadn't experienced in many years.
Mark fucking Lantis. I can't believe it.
Tyler had an edgy, commanding voice that probably made his many employers shudder and scatter, but I knew him like a brother, so his bravado just made me laugh. Yeah, can you believe it? I asked as I gave him a hug and a slap on the back. Back at the front gates. 15 a day doesn't seem so ridiculous now.
$15 a day, my ass.
Brandon said as he shook his head.
By my math, it looks like we'll be charging about $65 a day.
I'll pay it.
Charlotte smiled as she gave Koji a hug.
Are people really gonna pay $65 a day?
Koji asked.
I mean, even Disneyland only charges $85, and there, at least you get access to 2 parks.
How could I forget?
Brandon shook his head.
One of our investors works for the mouse. Pity they won't let you design any artwork for this place.
Come on, man. I'm not an artist, I'm an engineer.
Don't you mean Imagineer?
Charlotte winked at him. Koji sighed and shook his head.
Yeah, I do.
As Brandon and Charlotte teased Koji, I made my way over to the side of the ticket booth where Scott and his girlfriend were conversing. I didn't know why Scott was being so standoffish, but I thought it might have something to do with the investment. Scott, the least well-off of us 6, worked at his dad's collision shop and hadn't had a whole lot of money to invest. I thought maybe he was embarrassed about the money, but now, watching him lean against the booth with slowly shifting eyes, I realized it wasn't that at all. Scott was just stoned. The same old Scott. What's up, Burnout, my brother? I haven't seen you in like 15 years. How about a bro hug? Scott smiled and pushed off the wall to come give me a quick hug. Hey, how's it going, man? Shit, look at you. What is your diet, man? Rabbit food and lettuce? You're not gonna get any ladies with that skinny body. Your mom doesn't seem to mind.
Hey, Mark. I'm Danny. Do you remember me? Danny Burchard?
Scott's girlfriend gave me a shy smile and stuck out her hand so we could engage in a stiff handshake. I think so. You were in my sister's class, right? Danny had the decency to look embarrassed.
Yeah, but we weren't really friends.
That's putting it lightly, I thought.
We were freshmen when you guys were seniors?
Yeah, I do remember that. Maybe I should just get it over with. I called Charlotte over, and the reintroduction of the 2 girls, while awkward, was over pretty quickly to everyone's relief. We were all eager to get into the park. It was odd not stopping at the window for tickets, and even odder to walk around the rusting turnstiles of the front gates. I delighted in reminding myself that we owned this place now. Brandon gave us a tour of the park. Not so much of the geography, we all knew that inside and out, but the hypothetical layout and reorganization of the park as he saw it.
The Excalibur is going to need the most amount of work, according to Rich, my head contractor. A roller coaster made of wood exposed to the elements for all these years. Well, we'll keep as much of the original structures as safe, but we might have to rebuild most of it.
Do we have the money for that? Scott asked loudly from where he walked behind us with Danny.
Yeah,
Tyler said.
we have the money for that.
Ah, Mr. Moneybags, that mini dealership treating you good? I nudged him hard with my shoulder. Tyler stumbled, but kept enough composure to push me back into a passing churro stall.
Oh, those 6 BMW dealerships are treating me very well. Well enough to serve as the sizable collateral we needed.
Brandon added.
So,
Charlotte ran up behind us and threw her arms around Tyler and Koji.
can we ride some rides?
Are you kidding? Why do you think we're here?
I'm just here for Mayhem Mountain, I said, clapping my hands and rubbing them together eagerly. Brandon threw up his hands.
All right, fine. I thought you guys would be interested in how your investment is coming along.
Yeah, all we're interested in is the project's ROI, and more importantly, which rides have passed the safety inspection.
Oh.
Brandon stopped walking and tried to look annoyed, and failing that, he smiled.
A little over half of them are rideable.
Suddenly, everyone was talking at once.
Is still Viper open?
Yep, that one's on.
What about Snapdragon?
That one's good to go too. Renegade Falls? The water's not on.
High Roller?
Yes.
Space Spin?
Oh yeah.
Power Tower?
They're doing the inspection this week.
There was only one ride I really cared about. Mine and Brandon's favorite. What about Mayhem Mountain?
Yes.
He answered the collective groans from the rest. Mayhem Mountain had always been our thing. The others had always been happy to ride High Roller and Snapdragon into exhaustion. Brandon and I always split off toward the end of the day to ride Mayhem Mountain into the twilight hours.
Ugh, I hate that ride.
It's boring as hell. I mean, I helped design something similar for Disneyland Hong Kong. We put it in the Fantasyland, for fuck's sake.
Hey, that ride's awesome. It's long and it goes upside down. Charlotte is even too scared to ride it.
I'm not scared of that ride, it just gives me the creeps. Something about it just, I don't know, seems off.
Alright, look. We'll start at this end of the park and work our way towards the back. That way we can ride every ride that's passed inspection, including Mayhem Mountain. And Snapdragon.
Tyler added, and the others nodded excitedly.
Yes, every ride. And of course we can ride them, as many times as we want.
Hell yes, brother!
Koji high-fived Brandon, and we headed down the street towards Space Spin. Our progress through the park was blissfully slow. Everyone wanted to ride every ride multiple times, and one person always had to stay in the loading area to operate the ride. It only took an hour or two to forget that I was a fully grown 35-year-old man. Being back here, running through the lineways with my friends, arguing who got the first row of the first car, it was like being 12 again. Still, my eye was constantly drawn up over the buildings into the distance, to the back of the park where the high, gleaming rails of Mayhem Mountain shone in the unobscured sun. There would be no arguing who got front row on that coaster. It was me and Brandon. It was always me and Brandon. Charlotte, Tyler, and Koji were the most like children, constantly running ahead and arguing over which ride to go on next, yelling back to ask Brandon if this one or that one had been cleared by the contractors. Brandon and I held back from the group a bit, discussing ideas and possible improvements for the park. Scott and Danny took up the rear of the group, quietly talking and lighting joints. When we arrived at the Enterprise, a simple ride that consisted of spinning cars on a circular track, I offered to flip the switch while the rest of the group rode the excess. The Enterprise always made me sick when we were kids. Brandon offered to stay on the platform with me to chat while everyone else rode the ride. I flipped the switch to turn the ride on, and as the cars spun away from the loading area, the Enterprise's signage came into view. I sighed. All day I had been trying to ignore the bright graffiti sprayed all over the park, but the words painted over the signage for the Enterprise were impossible to ignore. Where did the missing kids go? And the rest of the graffiti in the park was much the same. Most said things like, "Where are they?" "Runaway Row," "Find Ryan Kinski," and "Missing or Dead Now." Similar sayings could be found in town, sprayed across a few dilapidated buildings in the industrial district. Brandon's eyes avoided the sign, but I could tell he was thinking about it too. "Do you think the reason they shut this park down? Do you see that being an issue for the park attendants?" I asked as casually as I could. Brandon was quiet for a few moments as he waited for the ride to slow to a stop so he could flip the switch again.
Nah, I don't think so. Low attendance issues aren't usually what shut the park down.
They aren't? This surprised me.
Nope. When we were negotiating the sale at the park, I was given access to the park's financials in the 80s.
So they weren't operating at a loss?
Oh, they were. But this park had operated in the red since opening day in the 70s. Half of their revenue was being fed back into something called county services, whatever that is. The bank couldn't tell me, and believe me, I tried to find out.
County services?
Yep. Real bizarre. And according to the paperwork, the park was closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore. And he couldn't be bothered to wait for a decent offer on the property, so he just sold it back to the bank for next to nothing.
So he was a rich guy. I leaned back against the railing to stretch my back. And an idiot.
Yes, to an extreme in both cases. The owner of the park was Abel Bassetti.
Abel Bassetti? Related to that French billionaire, I'm guessing? Brandon nodded.
Michael Bassetti. He built this park for his son in the 70s. Abel was never really what we would call business inclined. Yeah, I've always heard him described as, simple.
I can't believe the son of a billionaire lives in this area.
Well, not anymore. He moved on decades ago.
I shook my head in disbelief. Who would have ever thought that our simple little park was owned by a famous billionaire's son? Hell, I may even have sat next to him on rides and had no idea.
You guys want to go again?
Brandon yelled to the others as the ride again came to a stop.
I'm ready to move on.
Koji yelled back.
Anybody else want to ride again?
A chorus of groans ensued. It was near 5 o'clock when we finally arrived at Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began to set, a familiar panic and urgency welled up in the pit of my stomach. It took a moment for me to realize that we didn't have to leave when the park closed this time, because the park didn't close. We could stay up until sunup if we wanted to. As I eagerly approached the turnstile from Mayhem Mountain, Tyler spoke up behind me.
Listen, can we run into town and grab something to eat before we ride Mayhem?
You really want to ride Mayhem after we eat?
Good point.
There's only one loop.
2, I said. Don't forget the inline roll. Yep, 2. Plus, it's a 2-minute ride. If your food isn't sitting well, you've got a long wait till it's over. Look, let's ride it a couple of times, then go eat. When we come back, we'll see how we feel. Everyone nodded, and we started walking through the lineways up to the platform. When we reached the loading dock, I was excited to see our favorite green car sitting on the track.
Front seat!
Brandon and I yelled simultaneously as the train car came into view, and everyone behind us groaned.
I'm staying here. I'll just work the launch pad thingy.
Still scared after all these years, Shar?
Shut up, Burnout.
Scott laughed and tousled her hair before running and jumping into the first car behind Brandon and I. Danny got in next to him, and then Tyler and Koji took the second car. We pulled the shoulder restraints down and they locked in.
Ready?
Yep!
Brandon yelled back.
Send the car through!
Charlotte pulled the lever and the brakes disengaged. As the car moved forward, I turned to Brandon. Did we get the green car on purpose? I yelled to him as the coaster clacked around the load platform and began the clattery climb up the first lift hill.
Yeah! We sent cars through here all morning, but I made sure Rich knew to leave the green machine in the loading bay.
Awesome. As the train climbed up the lift hill, I made no attempt to hide my utter glee. I looked over the expansive park and couldn't believe it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every screw, from the front gate to the overflow parking lot in the back, it was all ours. How I wished I could go back in time and tell a young me waiting in the 2-hour line for Mayhem Mountain, one day you're gonna own this place. As we crested the hill, the train fell into the first drop. I realized I essentially had gone back in time. At least, I was screaming like a 12-year-old, as was everyone else behind me. We dipped into the first tester hill and then banked hard and up to the second lift hill. We dropped from there, down into the vertical loop, banked around a set of gift shops, up briefly, then down a small hill into the inline roll. When we arrived back at the loading bay, we were all screaming and hollering. Charlotte didn't even have to ask, just smiled at me and sent us through again. We went twice more before we finally got off the ride. Koji walked over to check out the control panel while the rest of us taunted my sister.
You sure you don't want to go, Char? It's awesome.
Nah, I'm good. I have no problem being in the carny for this ride.
Come on, Charlotte, just one time. One time, and we'll leave you alone.
No. No way. Not interested. I'll ride anything else, though.
Hey, do you guys know what Track B is?
Track B? What do you mean?
Brandon walked over to Koji at the control board and raised an eyebrow.
Huh. That's weird.
It's probably just the track they use to get the cars into the storage bay, Scott said with a shrug.
No, that's called a transfer track. Track B has to be something else.
Yeah, well, I've been on this ride enough times to know there's no other track.
Yeah, he has. So, should we try it?
Hell no. If you don't know what Track B is, that means the contractors don't know about it either. Which means it hasn't been inspected in at least 20 years. That's suicide.
Look, if Track B exists, then even the most incompetent of engineers would have found it during an inspection.
And Rich cleared this entire ride. It's probably just the ride in reverse. We're good.
Well, we're in, announced Scott from the other side of the track, though Danny didn't look quite on board with the idea.
Mark?
Yeah, I guess I'm in. What's the worst thing that could happen? We get funneled into a repair bay?
Alright. Then I'm in too.
Tyler said hesitantly.
Oh, here goes nothing.
Koji shrugged. He flipped the switch over to track B, and a moment later, a loud metallic scraping some distance away filled the park. The sound lasted almost a minute. I studied the familiar silver roller coaster under the pink sky of the setting sun, but I saw no physical changes to the track. I looked over at Brandon, and a shrug of his shoulders told me he didn't either. "Shall we?" Scott asked, gesturing to the train cars we'd just disembarked. I gave Charlotte a questioning look, but she shook her head emphatically no. So it was just the six of us again.
It's only right you two take the bow of the ship.
Tyler gave a mock salute.
Oh, captains, my captains.
I laughed and hopped into the right side of the front row. Brandon crawled into the seat next to me. Tyler and Koji got in behind us, and Scott and Danny took the back. We pulled the shoulder bars down, and they locked into place.
Are you sure about this?
Charlotte asked when everyone was settled. Danny said something from her place a few rows back, but all I heard was Brandon yelling, "Pull it." The brakes released, and the train rolled away from the platform and into the twilight of dusk. The lights had lit up on the track while we'd been arguing, and the roller coaster looked absolutely beautiful. I was filled with awe and reverence at what this place truly meant to me and my friends. It was a symbol of our youth and innocence, and the blissful ignorance of the world. It was our own little bubble of happiness. The coaster again climbed the lift hill, and from the top, Brandon and I studied the track, but in those few seconds, I saw no difference. Brandon looked over, and I shook my head at him disappointedly. By the time we reached the vertical loop halfway through the ride, it was clear that there was no track B. But it was hard to be upset because I was still on Mayhem Mountain, and still found it an impossible challenge not to smile. We banked around the now brightly lit gift shops, up the small tester hill, and then back down to the inline roll. Except the inline roll was suddenly above us. We'd missed it. Instead, the track now descended into a large square hole in the ground behind the gift shops, and we were headed directly into it. I was in too much shock to scream or even move. The black hole swallowed us up in an instant, and we descended into complete darkness. I felt a comfortable pressure leave my shoulders and realized that the shoulder bars had been released. I gripped the front ledge of my seat and heard the terrified screams of my friends behind me as the roller coaster suddenly spun into what felt like an inline roll. I was too scared to do anything but hold on for dear life, though some part of my brain registered the G-forces of the roll probably would have been enough to keep me in my seat even if I had let go. Probably. We came out of the inline roll and dropped again, hard. As the roller coaster dropped, the room suddenly lit up around us, and I saw the track below arching up into a light tester hill. As we hit the bottom of the hill, the shoulder bars lowered mechanically. The car went over a small hill and then braked to start up another tall lift hill. I took my first breath since dropping through the ground and looked around, tuning out the screams of Danny and Tyler behind me. We were in what can be described as a cavernous room, and I only assume it stretched to the farthest reaches of the park above. There were lots of vertical loops, high drops, and sharp curves that put the track perpendicular to the ground. Throughout the entire sub-level building, lamps dotted the wall every 30 feet. They put out a dreary yellowed glow far as the eye could see. But many were burnt out, and in parts the track disappeared into darkness. But in the dull yellow edges of the light, I saw something that registered in me a terror beyond death. Far away from us, in a section of shadowy track, I saw the high crest of a peak hill which reached almost to the ceiling of the giant room, and then the track just ended. Suddenly, I felt the horrible reality of the world outside my mind begin to bleed in. Danny was screaming uncontrollably, Tyler was crying, bawling even. Koji was yelling at Brandon, who was looking straight at me, hitting my leg hard and repeating my name. As the cars continued to climb, I finally gave him my attention. I didn't want to be alone with the fear anymore. "What is it?" was all I could think to say.
"We have to get off this ride! We have to get off this ride, Mark!
"I know, man.
We're going to die!"
"I know, man!" I yelled as we reached the top of the lift hill and dropped over the other side. I squeezed my eyes shut until I felt the shoulder bars once again release and bit my lip to keep from crying. I opened my eyes and choked as I watched the track ahead of us bend up into a vertical loop. I reached up and tried to pull my shoulder bar down, but it was locked in place. Hang on to the seats!" As we approached the loop, I felt the brakes engaging, slowing the car and a tow cable catch behind my feet. We were being pulled through the loop, but too slowly for gravity to keep us in our seats. As the train began to invert, I felt my feet rise from the floor of the car. My hair fell over my face and I left the seat. I closed my eyes to try to block out the screams of terror from behind me. I concentrated on my death grip on the ledge of my seat as we rounded the track. We remained upside down for what felt like eternity. Finally, the pressure began to ease. My butt dropped back into my seat and my feet to the floor. The white noise subsided from my ears and I heard Koji screaming.
Tyler, fuck, he fell out. He fell, he's dead, man, he's dead.
He hit the track down there!
Brandon yelled at me, wide-eyed and crazy looking. I was finally seeing the Brandon from my youth. The shoulder bars descended again, this time locking in tighter. We came out of the loop and sped up and down several tester hills. I tried to study the track ahead of us as we went through the safer parts. I thought I saw water reflecting off the metal rails somewhere in the distance. Brandon sobbed in his seat.
Mark, what are we gonna do? I don't want to die, man. I don't want to die.
I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I'm scared too. We banked around a corner of the room and the shoulder bars released again. This time we dove into a curve that put the side of the train parallel to the ground, and it was a long drop. I gripped the edge of the seat tightly as before, but this time I kept my eyes open and was able to catch Brandon as he began to slip out of his seat. By the time the train righted itself, I couldn't tell who'd been lost. Most of the screaming behind me had turned to loud sobbing or silence. The shoulder bar didn't re-engage, and I felt the car's brakes slow the train again. I didn't have to look to know what was coming next. It was another inverted loop. This one was tall and large, and I could tell we'd be upside down for longer. Someone behind me began screaming again, Danny, I think, as I tried to take measured breaths and position my hurting back under the lip of the seat. Brandon did the same and looked over at me as the car started up the loop with tears streaming down his face.
I don't want to die in here, man.
I shook my head back at him because I could think of nothing to say. I felt tears leave my eyes as we reached the tipping point of the loop and my feet again left the floor. Before we were even completely upside down, I felt my back begin to slip down the seat. I thought if I lost my grip, I could try to grab for the shoulder bars when I fell out of the car. The car suddenly stopped and I opened my eyes again to see we were completely inverted. I grunted loudly at the pain and immense effort it was taking to keep my grip on the seat. The car started to move again slowly, and I heard Brandon say something behind me. I looked over at him just before he slid out of the car. 1 second he was there next to me, and the next he was falling away from the car. I saw Brandon try to grab the shoulder bar on the way out, but he couldn't keep his grip on it. I watched him fall and saw him break his back on the track below and stop moving. I stared down at him as the car continued moving slowly around the loop, and he stared back up at me, dead or dying. By the time the car hit him on the way out of the loop, he was completely gone. The shoulder bar re-engaged, and we went through a dreadfully long period where nothing happened. We were secured in our seats by the restraints as the coaster spent what felt like several minutes racing over hills, banks, and curves, even an inline roll. Without the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I felt the shock begin to wear off. It was replaced by a panic and fear unlike any I'd ever experienced, and I decided that was the point of this section of the track, to build and facilitate an unbearable fear. I felt the brakes engage finally, and I looked ahead to find the loop we were surely entering, but there was none. We were high, almost to the top of the ceiling, and we slowed to a stop on a straightaway. Directly ahead was a drop, and at the bottom of the hill, a series of 4 different tracks, with a transfer stack just before they split off. Each track had 5 or so feet of color, red, orange, green, and blue, before racing off in different directions. I felt an urgent shaking of my shoulder and turned around to hear what Koji was saying.
Which track are we connected to?
I looked at the transfer stack. Green.
Where does green go?
I tried to trace the green track through the building, constantly losing it and finding it again. I wasn't sure, but it seemed to end at the lift hill I'd seen earlier. The hill with no track at the top. It ends at that hill! I yelled back at him and pointed. Danny cried louder. While we were stopped, I rubbed my hurting hands together. As I looked down at them, I noticed something new in the car. At some point, a small, blinking panel had flipped over in the wall of the front of the car. It had 4 colored buttons and an odd analog timer. The timer was so old and damaged that though the numbers were clearly changing, I couldn't see how long we had. "We have to choose," I said and explained what I was looking at.
Can you see which track ends where?
I followed all the tracks as best I could, but the rails circled and slid in between each other. It was hard to tell which track went where. "I think the blue track ends in that big pool in the corner. The red track ends in a wall, and the orange just drops into a hole in the floor, like the one we came down here through. I think..."
"There's no way out, dude,"
said Scott from the second car. His voice was unsettlingly calm.
"They're just telling us how we're going to die."
"We can still find a way out of this," I answered quietly, more to myself than him.
"Choose the pool,"
Scott said, and I could hear the tears in his voice.
"I've heard drowning isn't an awful death. I've heard it's calming at the end."
No, choose the hole in the floor. It's possible it drops down into another cavern like this. There might be more track, which means more time to figure out how to live.
"You don't think we'd be the first to choose that option, do you? And no one that went missing ever came back. There's just more death in that hole."
I don't want to die like this. And at least it's a chance.
Danny was still whimpering in the back and offered no suggestion. It seemed the decision was up to me, and I had to make it fast. I knew I didn't want to die by dropping off the track. I didn't want to drown. Perhaps the quickest death was the wall. More than likely, we would all be killed instantly. Less suffering, less time to think about our fates. But the truth was, I wasn't entirely positive which track ended where. It was all educated guesswork, and my time was up. "The orange. Let's go down to the second floor, if there is one." Scott and Danny said nothing, and Koji choked out the last words I'd ever hear him say.
Please, push it before it chooses for us.
Before I could think about it any longer, I pushed the orange button and committed us to whatever death it led to. We heard the metallic scraping of the track transferring below. Once the orange track was securely connected, the brakes on the car released and the train rolled slowly toward the drop. Danny started screaming again. As we dropped down the hill, I got a better view of the orange track. There was a vertical loop ahead that didn't look as high as the others we'd been through. In fact, it looked like there was a chance the fall wouldn't kill us. And if the shoulder bars disengaged for that loop, we might have a shot at living through this. I yelled back to everyone behind me, "Let yourself fall out of the loop, the one up there!" No one responded to me, which didn't matter because I didn't think I'd have the courage to let go of the seat anyway. We raced along the track, in and out of banks and curves. At one point, we passed along the pool and I looked down. Below the water's surface, the track ended above an even deeper pool. I could see the shadows of several coaster cars at the very bottom. I suddenly felt the brakes engage, and I realized we were coming to a loop. I tested the shoulder bar by pushing on it, but it stayed locked. I was somewhat relieved at that moment to know I wouldn't have to make the decision to fall out now or gamble on the orange track. But suddenly, the restraints released. As we started up the loop, I gripped the lip of the seat tightly and turned my head back to look down. It looked like we were very high, and I only hoped that the ground was the loosely packed dirt that I thought it looked like. I had to choose now, to fall or the hole. I chose to fall. As I began to slide up the seat, I yelled to the others to let go and fall out of the car, and then I closed my eyes and let go. I felt my head crack the shoulder bar on the way out. It wasn't like a slow-motion fall. It was over before I realized that I'd actually let go. One moment I felt intense pain as my head hit the bar, and in the same moment, I realized I was on the ground. I hadn't even had time to realize the possibility of hitting the track below or getting run over by the cars. I opened my eyes in time to watch the cars speed over the track above me. The pain didn't hit me all at once. I had one long, blissful second before I felt it, and then I was in agony. I had hoped my body was so in shock that I wouldn't feel much of the pain, but I felt it all. I concentrated on keeping my eyes open and trying to catalog the damage. There was blood on my clothes, but I didn't know what part of my body it was coming from. I heard screaming as well, but I didn't know if it was in my head or coming from my friends as they approached the end. I didn't want to move, didn't think it was safe to move, but I knew I had to, if only to pull out my phone. With trembling fingers, I pulled the thing from my pocket and brought it to my face, trying to focus on the screen. But it was shattered and refused to even turn on. I threw it away, and then I realized the silence. Their ride had ended. With a great amount of effort, I rolled over onto my stomach and dragged my broken body across the ground toward where I thought I remembered seeing the hole. I crawled for what seemed like an hour, and maybe it was. Sometimes I tried to stand or even kneel, but the pain in my back and ribs was too great. I passed out several times from shock and pain, but eventually I made it to where the track disappeared into the ground. I pulled myself to the ledge and looked down inside the hole. The track ended just below the surface. It was a natural shaft with walls made of rock. I didn't know how deep it went, and I didn't want to. It was a fate I'd only narrowly escaped, but then I thought my friends were down there, and maybe someone survived. "Koji!" My voice echoed loudly down the shaft. No answer. "Scott!" I reached for a nearby screw and dropped it down the hole. It took half a minute to land, and when it did, it was with a tink as it hit something metal. The small sound echoed up the shaft and out into the cavernous room, and I realized this place was built with acoustics in mind. I rolled over onto my back and studied everything I could see from where I was. Staving off my body's desire to pass out again, I felt nothing but numbness when I finally saw what I was looking for. A long, panoramic window in the far wall. I knew what Track B was for, and finally let myself slip away into the darkness. I remember very little of my rescue. There were lots of people in uniform, and my sister yelling, and pain. Lots of pain. I was in and out on the way to the hospital, but I remember I passed through the room behind the window at some point, and from my stretcher, through the chaos, I saw in that room a single chair facing the window. It was covered in a deep layer of dust. I was never visited by anyone official, let alone asked to give a statement. Charlotte stayed by my side at the hospital for months while I recovered. She wouldn't say much about that day, although she finally did tell me something. She said that they wouldn't let her ride with me to the hospital, and that someone offered her a ride. On that drive, she'd been spoken to by 2 people who had convinced her to never speak of what had happened, and to convince me of the same. Whatever they threatened her with had her begging me to agree, and I did at the same time. I am still to this day learning to walk without aid. I never saw Mayhem Mountain again. The loan defaulted, and Adventure Valley was bought up by an unknown LLC, which bulldozed it and built a block of apartments over the top. They're still empty to this day. I don't like the dark anymore. It reminds me of the horror my friends experienced as they looked down and saw the track end before they disappeared into that hole. I try not to think about what they must have felt as they fell down the shaft in complete darkness, strapped to a roller coaster, waiting for the terrible end. I'd wished I'd chosen the pool, if only to save them from that fate. As for the billionaire's son, he was only simple in the fact that he was a man of simple tastes, and he still is. I looked him up once, only a few years ago. He owns several amusement parks now, all sizable but small enough to be popular only in their specific regions. In fact, one is not very far from where I live now. I've thought about going many times, just to check in, just to see. But then I realized I probably didn't need to search all the rides in the park to know. Because I know that somewhere in that park, some ride in some corner, has a Track B. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long, and I haven't really put out many updates. Things have been a little hectic, and I don't want to get into too many details, but there's just been a few things going on, as well as I've had a bunch of setbacks with stories, and I think I mentioned that in one of the recent compilations, but it just seemed like there was just one thing after another, and it kind of started to make me feel burnt out a little bit, and that definitely played a role in why it's taken me so long to get back on top of things. But yeah, I'm feeling better. I'm excited about some new videos I'm working on. One thing that I am going to do differently going forward is I'm going to not really mention too much about what I'm working on, just because I know that I've setbacks, sometimes things happen, and I know it's really disappointing for me to say, oh, I'm working on this, it'll be done, next week, and then it just doesn't come out. And I want to avoid that in the future, and I'll really only mention projects that are coming out when they're basically done. But yeah, I hope you liked the story. This story was by C.K. Walker, who is also the author of Baraska. And something I really liked about the story is how it kind of just felt more like a classic creepypasta, kind of like Abandoned at Disney. And it was really fun to do the sound design for this one, because I don't really get to do one very often where there's like roller coasters and stuff. I'm really curious to see what all of you think. I'm going to take some extra time today to just hang out in the comments, because I want to try to reply to as many comments as I can, and just get back to interacting with you all, since I know there's been a little bit of a gap where I've kind of just been gone. But yeah, if you leave a comment, I'll be sure to reply to it. And with that said, I hope you have a great day.